everyone. Welcome to the Racist War and Everything. We are up to episode 225, recording on a chilly Monday evening here in Perth. We've basically missed a week. We're sorry about that. Nolza, you were supposed to be with me last Wednesday, and then you couldn't, and then, stuff happened.
Yep.
And you got caught in traffic today, which is why we're doing this a little late in the evening time slot as well. So anyway, some of what we're on is sort of, yesterday's news, but we will try and give you kind of a condensed version of the last 2 weeks of Australian politics. So, of course, what was one of the big stories was the cabinet reshuffle for the Federal Labor Party. Now, this was spurred on by the resignations of two ministers. One was Linda Burney, who, of course, was the Indigenous Affairs Minister. Not the first Indigenous minister.
No.
That went to Ken Wyatt in the Liberal Party. So the Liberals beat Labor to that one. She was, however, the first female Indigenous Affairs Minister. And, kind of fair to say that her whole legacy is defined by the voice referendum, which she lost, of course. But still, everyone's going on about how much of an inspiration she is and how much she has achieved. I saw Warren Mundine talking about her and saying, well, look, she wasted close to $500 million on the voice referendum that, if anything, actually set Aboriginal reconciliation backwards. If it did, Warren, that's a good thing. But anyway, what else did she do? She oversaw the abolition of the cashless welfare card. She saw spiralling out of control Aboriginal crime in WA, the Northern Territory, Queensland, and basically nationwide. So I'd like someone to actually tell me, what did Linda Burney achieve in her 2.5 years as Indigenous Affairs Minister? She has achieved bugger all. In fact, she did some very bad things. Cashless welfare card was certainly up there. And
she objectively made life for Aboriginals worse. The communities were less violent when she started. There was less fucking deaths when she started. There was less fucking businesses turning tail and fucking hauling ass out of the fucking center and north of Australia.
There were no
objectively across the board worse.
Yeah, there were no what they call the crimfluencer videos, the TikTok videos, like recording crimes. You didn't have the curfews in Alice Springs. You didn't have, the widespread violence that's been happening all over the Northern Territory. Now, I know that to a large extent that's the fault of state and territory governments as well, but certainly, taking the pressure off in terms of how they spend their welfare money and areas that are allowed to have alcohol. Let's also remember that is a federal government's remit, the dry zones that they had in the Northern Territory, because that was implemented as part of the intervention by the Howard government back in 2007. She undid all of that as well. So, and after all of this, she's not even completing a full term. It doesn't say that much about Aboriginal working ethic, does it? If you can't even finish one term as minister.
Do you remember hearing those arguments that saying denying Aboriginals the right to basically become abusive alcoholics was racism?
Yeah. I mean, that was basically the line that was been peddled out in the Northern Territory. Because remember, the Labor government did not want to reintroduce the dry zones. Albo went over there. The only reason basically he went over there was to tell them, you've got to do this because we've got the voice referendum coming up, and having Aborigines out of control, drunk, and committing all these crimes, It's not a good look. So yeah, basically they had to take away that right for them to be drunken hoodlums. They had no choice. Okay, now the other minister leaving is Brendan O'Connor. Uh, Recently, he was only in the outer ministry. He had the portfolio of skills and training. So I guess you'd say the thing he would be most recognised for nowadays would be the fee-free TAFE program that Labor took to the last election. And if he has bragging rights in any respect, it's that the amount of people who signed up for fee-free TAFE was actually more than their goal. So I don't know. Maybe is that is possibly one of Labor's achievements in the past 2.5 years or so that they have been in government. But Brendan O'Connor, definitely fair to say that he was a more well-rounded and experienced and yes, successful minister than Linda Burney ever was. He actually served in 3 different Labor governments. So, he held a range of portfolios. Okay, so what about those who are being elevated in the cabinet and who's been demoted or who's been shifted around is maybe a better
winners and losers and neutrals.
Winners and losers. Yeah, so look, what everyone was talking about when the reshuffle was announced was what is going to happen to Andrew Giles, the immigration minister, and what is going to happen to Claire O'Neill, the Home Affairs minister. Immigration, I have to remind people, is actually part of Home Affairs. The Department of Home Affairs, remember, is like a super department that encompasses intelligence, so like ASIO, the AFP, border protection, immigration, of course, a whole wide range. So Claire O'Neill is, elevated to a higher position than Andrew Giles is, given that she is Home Affairs Minister and he has the junior portfolio of immigration. Nonetheless, it was kind of fair to say that Claire O'Neill had to kind of pay for the various examples of incompetence by Andrew Giles. He was always seen as sort of the weak link in that respect. So, as expected, they were shifted. Now, it's up to others, I guess, to say whether or not this amounts to a demotion. In the case of Claire O'Neill, I definitely would say it's a demotion because she has been moved to housing. Now, housing is a hot button issue, but it is certainly nothing like managing the super department of Home Affairs. Andrew Giles, on the other hand, has been shifted to skills and training. So that is the portfolio that Brendan O'Connor just left. Some people have quipped that, maybe this will actually give Andrew Giles some skills and training to be a better minister. But worth pointing out that, excuse me, it's a very bad joke. But worth pointing out that he did go from one junior portfolio to another. So, debatable as to whether or not he was demoted. But nonetheless, those two had to be moved.
It depends how much that department's like fucking lent on in the future. That's going to decide.
Well, yeah, and also it's worth pointing out that now the government has taken the portfolio of immigration and put it back into cabinet. So it was a junior ministry before, now it's a senior ministry. It's back in cabinet. So who's got that job? Tony Burke. So he was, of course, the industrial relations minister. So he was the one who sort of, kicked off the process of an independent administrator taking over the CFMEU. We'll have more on that a bit later. But Tony Burke is widely regarded as one of the most competent ministers. Some people have said that they even see him as a future leader of Labor. I don't know about that because I just don't think he has the personality for that. He might be like a good behind-the-scenes technocrat or whatever, but I can't see him actually, being a public figure with a lot of mass appeal. I just don't see it in Tony Burke.
Yeah, some people should not be clientele-facing. Some people should be back of house.
And he actually, like back in the day, he used to speak with a really pronounced lisp. He doesn't have it anymore. So he must have
bring it
gotten,
back.
like,
Bring it back, you little fucking homosexual.
because there's no way he would have. I mean, I don't think he'll become leader anyway. But yeah, there's no way you could become leader and have a speech impediment like that. It just wouldn't work. So, look, I have to point out he is taking on immigration and home affairs, both of them, and he's taking over a revamped immigration portfolio that's been elevated to cabinet. And he also retains his own portfolio of the arts as well. So, yeah, a lot of people have said that this is it's unusual for a minister to be carrying so much at the moment. But apparently, Tony Burke is one of those competent types who can handle various things going on at the same time. Okay, so what about the rest of the reshuffle? So Murray Watt is moving from agriculture to take on IR. So he's taking on employment and workplace relations, which Tony Burke is moving out of. Julie Collins is becoming the agriculture minister. So she held that portfolio in opposition. Who else we got? So Kate Thwaites, Julian Hill, and Josh Wilson have been elevated into the assistant ministry. So they also get called parliamentary secretaries, I believe is the other term they use. Not quite a minister, but getting there. And Pat Conroy, he's staying in defence industry and Pacific portfolios. However, that is another portfolio that's been elevated into cabinet. So that is still a promotion of sorts. And, look, if you haven't heard of half or any of those people I just mentioned, don't worry, they're not exactly big names. Really, the only one that was sort of big was Murray Watt. He has been said to be sort of like an overlooked talent within the Labor caucus for a while, but now he's finally gotten a proper cabinet position. Okay, so that's about all we have to say in the reshuffle. On the other machinations of the Labor Party, however, it's worth talking about a recent conference that they had in New South Wales because this got kind of rowdy. And that's not a terribly, rare thing to happen. Wait, sorry, hold on. Before I talk about that, I'm supposed to talk about who took on the Indigenous Affairs portfolio. 1 second.
Indigenous Affairs, where's that?
Okay, so the new or the incoming minister is Malandiri McCarthy, who is another, not full-blooded Aboriginal woman, and she's got very, very frizzy hair. I don't know if she's made any records, if she's the first whatever, but there's no way I think you can get into this portfolio anymore unless you have some Aboriginal blood, or if you're.
I think you have to be an Aboriginal woman at this point. Don't even think being Aboriginal is good enough at this point.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. Okay, so this conference that Labor recently had in Sydney. So this was with the New South Wales branch, of course, and there were some disruptions. They can get rowdy here. So the Electrical Trades Union, they heckled certain party officials when they spoke in support of the decision to exclude the CFMEU's construction division. That basically means just excluding the CFMEU. The construction division is the CFMEU. Some of them did things like turn their back, booed, yelled out shame. That's not surprising coming from the ETU because, CFMEU will always be the heavyweight champs in terms of union militancy, but second place would go to the ETU. They're a pretty don't fuck with us union as well. Now, during Albert was there, and during his speech, he did thank the mighty trade union movement, but he did not address the absence of the CFMEU. In fact, I don't think he even mentioned the CFMEU at all. It was just sort of like, don't ask, don't tell, I think. Now, there were also pro-Palestinian protesters that gathered outside, and man, they love targeting the Labour Party, don't they? Like, I mean, I think we've got one on a speech that Peter Dutton did. We've got one story on that a bit later, and I just haven't read about that. Like pro-Palestine demonstrators aren't targeting the Liberal Party. They're only going after Labour. Now, that is obviously in part because, well, Labour are in power. But it's also because, like, they feel that the membership in the Labour Party is not being represented by its leaders, because you do have so many pro-Palestinian voices and activists within Labour, but it just isn't, being articulated. Certainly not at the federal level. Okay, now on that note, we're going to talk about the whole Israel-Gaza situation, sticking in New South Wales. And New South Wales Labor voted on a motion to recognise Palestinian statehood. Now,
oh no, not again.
So, well, no, I mean, remember, it was the Greens, who passed that motion last time, and they basically lost a senator as a result of that. But this was actually at the party conference. This was a motion that passed. Now, it doesn't mean anything on a practical level. This is purely symbolic, of course. But remember, Labor's power source is Sussex Street, the New South Wales right. Really, like, policy for the Labor Party starts in Sydney. And this motion was brought forth by the Cabinet Minister Jihad Dib. That's right. And he represents the seat of Bankstown, which, of course, is in Western Sydney. And when he announced this, he was met with a standing ovation. So there you go. I mean, more and more proof that if you want to simply look at the grassroots level of the Labor Party, there's certainly
grassroots politics in Australia is now functionally, and this is across the board at this point, an ethnic head count.
Oh yeah, I mean, just take the name of that minister. The guy's name is literally Jihad, for God's sake. So yeah, and this, we can make the whole commentary about the Muslim vote and all that kind of stuff. You're gonna see all of these Muslims and these Arabs and that they're gonna, these are traditional Labor voters, and yes, they're gonna start breaking away. The more and more Labor chooses to ignore them and ignore the pro-Palestinian voices generally, they are going to start breaking away. It's debatable as to whether or not this will translate into, Muslim vote seats in the next federal parliament, because as we covered last time, they just may not be able to get their shit together on time. They lack the experience and the resources, and they're not like the Teals who have Climate 200 and Simon Holmes a Court financially backing them. The finances for the Muslim vote are genuinely grassroots. They're not AstroTurf like the Teals. So, they have that as a disadvantage for them.
Okay. But it's that funding isn't as susceptible to like volatile change than AstroTurf funding.
Yeah. And Simon Holmes a Court is not running out of money either. He's already got plenty in the back pocket, and they're already kind of gearing up for the Teals, even in the Northern Territory for their upcoming election in 3 weeks' time. If you can believe that, yes, Teals running in the Northern Territory. I think we have a story on that later. Okay, now, more on these this internal division within Labor. So the former MP for Eden Monaro, Mike Kelly, he was kind of the lovable uncle in Parliament that everyone liked, including people in the Liberal Party. he actually, at the end of last year, he was a co-founder of Labour Friends of Israel, I believe they're called. Yeah. Now, look, there's already another group called Labour Friends of Palestine. So, right there you go. That's you need any more evidence of divisions within the Labour Party. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. Anyway, Mike Kelly, who is the Labour Friends of Israel, has taken a shot at the Greens in talking about how Greens representation for Jewish communities within inner city Melbourne would be very bad. And here he's specifically talking about the seat of Macnamara. That is Josh Burns' seat, Labor Jewish member of federal parliament, of course. His office was vandalized. In fact, it was more than vandalized. It was basically subject to an arson attack.
Yeah, that was just straight up a fucking firebombing. That's not vandalism at that point.
Yeah, I'm not. I won't sugarcoat.
Yeah, it's like so. It's not the same as fucking spray paint, buddy.
No, they literally lit a fire there. So no, that was full on. And by the way, quick update on that. An 18-year-old woman and a 17-year-old boy have both been charged for what they did there. Which the ABC reports as politically motivated vandalism. Okay, I would just say it's politically motivated arson. I don't think he was targeted because he's Jewish. He got targeted because he's a Zionist and very pro-Israel. So anyway, what Mike Kelly is worried about here is that it looks like, as we've commented on before, the seat of Higgins may actually be abolished at the next election. That is formerly Peter Costello's seat, blue ribbon seat, but very much under threat from the Teals, but also from the Greens because of what the Australian points out is what do they say here? Of inner city gentrification and large amounts of high density houses and renters. So that's when you get the hipsters coming in, and I guess a lot of renters like voting for the Greens because they support things like rent controls. And
that's weird. You'd never expect that now, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of those people are people who may never own a house in their life. And so they have a vested interest in just having perpetual rent that is low in price. So with the abolition of the seat of Higgins, and also, what else is there? So Macnamara may also incorporate parts of Prahran and South Yarra. And these are also areas that are said to have large amounts of Green voters and large amounts of gentrification. So, funnily enough, the Liberal Party seems to be fine with this. They're fine with all of these boundaries being redrawn because it is a threat to Labor. It looks like if all these electoral boundary changes go ahead, it means that the Greens may actually take this seat from Labor. And Mike Kelly is very angry at the Liberals for supporting this because it's a case of, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They want favours to be done for the Greens just because it will hurt Labor. And Mike Kelly is saying, whoa, hold on a minute. Isn't this the radical left anti-Semitic party that you're always bashing? Why on earth would you support them in this case? So and it also seems like Mike Kelly is saying that the seat would be better off being held by the Liberals than it would by the Greens. And I mean, Mike Kelly is all but saying that the Greens are an anti-Semitic party themselves now because them being representative of Jewish voters in Melbourne would be bad. That's what he's saying. I mean, really, what would actually happen?
Bottom boys stealing our top title?
Is a Greens MP in Macnamara what are they going to be stirring up pogroms or something in fucking inner city Melbourne? For Christ's sake.
No, there's too many exposed brick walls, and the Prussian blue will show through immediately.
Okay, so Daniel Andrews did a speech at a Melbourne synagogue the other day. And by the way, Daniel Andrews is part of the Labour Friends of Israel. And
yeah,
he said that he does not support Palestinian statehood at the moment. And this is like the stance of the federal government as well. They're saying that, so long as we've got a war going on and Hamas are the representatives of people in Gaza, we can't support a two-state solution. A two-state solution could only occur when you have a more peace-loving party representing both Gaza and the West Bank, and they recognize Israel's right to exist and live in security. But then you have got Peter Moss, and this is a guy from the opposing Labour Friends of Palestine. And he says, well, actually, what Daniel Andrews is saying there is out of step with the membership. It may not be out of step with the leadership at both the state and federal level, but it's out of step with the membership. And I'd say he's probably right too. And like I said, I think that is one of the reasons why protesters have been targeting Labor and Labor MPs so harshly over the past few months, partly for that reason. Okay. Now, the Jewish community is not happy about a recent review of multiculturalism. So this is apparently a once in 50-year review that was commissioned by Labor. It was said to report on the general state of multiculturalism in Australia. And what the Jewish community don't like about this is that it did not mention the rising anti-Semitism that we've apparently seen in Australia. And it also did not mention the breakdown in the nation's social cohesion. Okay, that point on social cohesion, I haven't read the report, but yeah, I would be very surprised if any report on multiculturalism dared to actually say that social cohesion had gone backwards in Australia, because that would be an implicit admission that multiculturalism is failing in this country. As it would, and as it always has done wherever it has been tried. There is no magic dirt in Australia that is going to make an exception to that rule. But anyway, Richard Marles, who's the Deputy PM, and he did retain his Ministry of Defence, he has announced that Labor is not committing to any of the report's 29 recommendations. They instead just support them in principle. And he did admit that the report, which is around 200 pages, did not mention anti-Semitism. So there we go. Now, look, I think one of the reasons for that is, well, similar to the point I made before. Even if you were to, say, mention a specific issue like anti-Semitism, that's still an admission that multiculturalism is not working. Because you have to admit that having Jews and Muslims living in the same areas isn't working. You'd have to actually
didn't work out in the fucking Middle East. Why do you think it'll work out here?
Right. So yeah, and then, I mean, what has actually been the net result of this report? Well, like I said, Richard Marles said, they're not implementing any of the recommendations at all. They just agree with them in spirit, in principle, which is just airy-fairy fucking rhetoric. And it's just a way for the government to say, hey, look, this example of multiculturalism is working, because our report doesn't say anything about, various forms of prejudice getting out of control or social cohesion breaking down. Okay, already mentioned Josh Burns. So, okay. So, one of Sydney's biggest councils is, well, they would have done this already, has ramped up security for its next meeting. Now, the reason why this happened is because at a recent meeting for this council, the Greens mayor, yes, they do have a Greens mayor in this seat, sorry, in this council. This is the Randwick Council. She apparently made an inflammatory speech that left a Jewish councillor and community member or members fearing for their safety. So the Liberal councillor David Rosenfeld, who is Jewish, the article notes, wrote to the council general manager saying that he had been very intimidated by the mayor's offensive speech and language and had received complaints and similar concerns from the community. Now,
What community?
It said that.
Which community? Right. Which specific one? You can tell me, can't you? It's a community, isn't it?
So look, the community that he is worried about, though, is the pro-Palestine community. So he said that, in addition to the fiery rhetoric and everything that was used in the speech, it's also attracting pro-Palestine activists to go to these meetings as well. So as a result of that, security has been beefed up. They're worried about Jews being beaten up at council meetings, I guess.
Has that happened? Can that happen?
It doesn't happen, but they're always getting more money for security or having security details beefed up.
I remember that one time I sent a psychic attack to that one Jewish grandmother, and she dropped a fucking mug in her home by herself. Yes, that has ended up in a fucking ECHA and annual anti-Semitism report. A Jewish grandma dropped a mug. I know I brought that up multiple fucking times, but it just needs to be reiterated, man.
Oh, there's also the high beams one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, someone got splashed with his high beams. God.
And they reported that as an anti-Semitic incident. Man, I'm spewing, it occurred to me, in February of this year or something, we did not review the 2023 ECAJ report on anti-Semitism. We totally forgot about it.
Well, I guess it's basically just a big section that says, oh my God, the Arabs are being mean and Octa 7.
You could sum it up in that way. But it's always funny to go through because of the pissy little things that they point out. Okay, now, here, I guess, is the Australian government showing a little bit of backbone in opposition to Israel. They've actually imposed financial sanctions and travel bans on 7 Israeli settlers who are in the occupied West Bank. Now, since October 7, this is something that has gotten very little coverage, but some of the more militant settlers in the West Bank have taken up arms against their Palestinian neighbors, basically. They've gone on a rampage and they've gone around killing a lot of Arabs. Yes, this is true. And a lot of them receive a lot of financial backing from various Jewish donors around the world. One of them in Australia is that Gutnick guy. I always forget his last name. But he's part of, isn't it? He used to own one of the Australian football league. Yeah, Joseph Gutnick. Yeah, and he was the former president of the Melbourne Football Club. So he is also he refers to himself as a philanthropist, but really it's just his money being used to pay for illegal settlements in the West Bank. That's basically what he does.
Yep. It's Tikkun Olam Goy. It's healing the world and fucking killing the Goyim. And taking some fucking 70 IQ sheep. Did you see that one video that came out recently? An Arab with like a video camera cell phone, pretty decent one, and he's literally filming this one fucking like Israeli that comes up and literally just like pulls a gun at him and says like, yeah, this is mine. Like leave or I'm gonna shoot you, and two, like, give me your fucking cane and give me your fucking like how many head of cattle you have because they're also mine. Literally pulled a fucking handgun on the dude.
As you can imagine, the type of Jews who live in those occupied territories or the West Bank, they're like the worst of the worst. They live there by choice, as a way of sticking it to the Arabs and saying, we're not happy with what we've got. We're going to continue to impose upon your territory in the West Bank, basically to the point where we'll annex about a third of it very soon. And I have no doubt they'll do that eventually. So it shouldn't be a huge surprise that a lot of these settlers are violent and they take up arms against Arabs that they live near. So, yeah, we have actually sanctioned 7 of them, which still some groups call anti-Semitic. But really, like, that's about as far as the Australian government is going to go. They'll sanction individuals. There is no way in hell they would sanction the actual Israeli government. Okay, now, we do, of course, focus on the Australian point of view when it comes to this conflict. And, what could you argue are our interests over there, and specifically in Gaza? Do we have any interest there? Well, it turns out that there's actually a historic cemetery located in the Gaza Strip. And this cemetery houses a lot of Australian, is a resting place for a lot of Australian war veterans. And, up until now, the occupiers of that land have actually been quite good custodians of it. They've kept it, they've preserved it, they've looked after it. But now we've got aerial photographs that shows that a lot of this cemetery has been destroyed. Why is that? Well, because of Israeli military operations. So
getting bombed the fuck out of because they're doing an ethnic cleansing campaign on the people that live around it.
Right. And do you think they give a fuck about our cemeteries there? So, according to these reports here, it says that at least 16
flesh to them
have been desecrated ever since the IDF started its ground offensive. So it contains over 3,600 Commonwealth burials, mainly from World War I. Around 260 of the graves are dedicated to Australian soldiers, primarily light horsemen killed in 1917.
Now last machine gun charge. Don't charge machine guns with fucking horses. It was a bad idea, but we did succeed. We did push back the machine guns because Jesus fucking Christ, they weren't expecting light cavalry to charge them.
No, and I'm not going to go into Gallipoli. I always find it weird how we celebrate Gallipoli, but anyway. But yeah, they found that these tombstones or these graves, most of them have either been destroyed or damaged, thanks to the IDF. So how about that? The Gaza Strip under the administration of Hamas preserved these cemeteries. They had no quarrel with them whatsoever. As soon as the Jews got in there, well, different story.
Yeah, again, what was the merchant of Venice? What was his name? Shylock?
Yeah.
Yeah, Shylock doesn't care where his obliterated goy comes from. He only wishes it to receive an obliterated goy. It can be a dead Australian soldier or it can be an Arab. There's no difference in their mind.
Right. And this is our greatest ally in the region, as Shari Markson likes to say. Okay, now, well, here's something else the Jews won't like, and that is that the Australian government is not considering listing Hizb ut-Tahrir as a terrorist organization. Kind of that is surprising, I've got to say. Obviously, because of the amount of Jewish pressure that would be on them, and the fact that they've been openly celebrating October 7 since it happened. But also, when I look up Hizb ut-Tahrir, I got to say, I look at them and I'm like, I don't want these cunts in my country. Like, maybe I can form some kind of alliance of convenience with them at a distance, at a very long distance. But, this is a group that calls for a global caliphate.
Yeah.
So they are actually, pretty extreme by any measure. But yeah, for whatever reason, the Australian government is not looking to list them as a terrorist group, at least not for the time being. All right, so there was this is the last story in Israel and Gaza. There was an inquiry into the Israeli strike on I think it was just was it a van or a truck? I'm not sure. But anyway, it was like a small convoy of vehicles that were delivering food aid to Gazans. And as we know, they're basically facing mass starvation at the moment. This resulted in the death of Australian citizen Zomi Francom. She was half Indian, but nonetheless. And this report found that there were serious failures of the IDF and their intelligence. I do not buy that for a second. This was a vehicle that was clearly marked. They were delivering aid in an area that the IDF told them was safe. The idea that this was an accident, I'm about as likely to believe that as when they send a precision missile into a hospital and then say, oh, that was Hamas or that was Islamic Jihad. I don't believe them.
Oh, dude, remember that fucking, was it whatever the fuck, dumb fucking Arab name, a hospital, and then for the first 3 months, they're like, no, it was Hamas, it was a Hamas ordnance that just went off, it was a bad missile from Hamas, and then they turned around and said, yeah, we fucking did it, who gives a shit? Literally lying through their fucking teeth.
But this is what we've got now. They originally said it was an accident. This inquiry is said to
support... Oh, no, they denied doing it to start off with. Yeah, they denied bombing the aid convoy to start off with, yeah.
Yeah. But, yeah, this was a fuck up. No, it wasn't. I mean, they actually told them. They gave them instructions. They said that this is an area and we're not going to attack them. And, it was an aerial assault. Okay, they bombed them from the air, and they could clearly see that it was a marked vehicle. So I don't fucking believe them at all.
They just wanted to bomb a humanitarian aid convoy. They just need to admit that at some point,
And, the Australian government was actually somewhat tough. Like, even Jason Clare, he said, no, sorry, we can't accept that it was just a case of shit happens and, it was an accident. Sorry. It's got to be more than that. Okay, let's turn to our favorite topic, immigration. And, of course, we know that Andrew Giles is no longer in that position. He is off in skills and training now. But I thought we would just sort of run through, his parting gifts as immigration minister and also a general summary of the legacy that he has left behind. So here's something that I bet you probably didn't even know. He introduced a new visa just before he left. So this was the subclass 408 Workplace Justice visa. Now, what this visa allows you to do, this is for migrant workers who do not have any other legal avenue to stay in Australia. This allows them to remain in Australia for up to 12 months to fight an active workplace claim against their employer. So basically, if you're over here on a work visa and you feel that you have been discriminated against or exploited, or the law's been broken in some form regarding your employment, well, you can hang around for up to a year and you can sue your employer over it. So that was one of the parting gifts from Andrew Giles. Another immigrant, here's another example from the NZYQ ruling that found indefinite detention to be illegal in Australia, and resulted in around 200 criminals being released. We've had yet another one who was released, charged with a string of violent offences that includes assault and possessing a weapon.
God damn.
And here's do we remember the Pajit who was attacked in Hobart? He was apparently just out night on the town or something, and he was randomly attacked, apparently. I don't know how random this could have been. But anyway, the attack left...
It's Hobart, mate. The entire island is a sundown country. It's a sundown island, Fajit. If you're on the streets during sundown, it's on, buddy.
I did read, I don't know why, but I was reading about Chopper Read recently. He's someone I've had a morbid curiosity with before. And his son lives in Tasmania. And
yeah, he retired out there, didn't he? When he fucking got
liver
disease and died.
Yeah. So his son apparently is just, headed down the same path as his dad. And apparently he was walking around Hobart with a harpoon in his hands, threatening people with it.
I guess the apple really didn't fall far from the tree on that one.
No, definitely.
That motherfucker went straight down.
Well, it's all right. He can go to jail and just write a book where 80% of it is bullshit and make money off it. Anyway, again, one of the very last things that Andrew Giles did was use his ministerial power, his unilateral power, to grant permanent residency to Devashi Dika. That's the guy's name. So why did they so desperately want to have permanent residency? Well, because the Indian healthcare system is shit. And when you've got a lucrative NDIS scheme to exploit in Australia, why wouldn't you take advantage of it? So basically, this guy is going to be on the public purse to the day he dies, when without this ministerial intervention, he would have actually been on a plane back home to India. So yeah, thank you, Andrew Giles, for that too. Okay, now the Albanese government has released more than 500 dangerous non-citizens from immigration detention in its first year in power. Who was the minister? Andrew Giles. So this was analysis of data.
What's the word for the human? You know how people call pit bulls shit bulls?
Yeah.
What's the human version of that?
I don't know.
Is it just shit skins?
Shit skins, yeah. I've always liked that one when it, to describe just sort of it's like a blanket term for Paki and Bangladesh and Indian, Nepalese as well, I guess. Anyway, so look, this was new data that shows 520 non-citizens were denied a visa because they had criminal convictions or failed other character requirements. They were released into the community in the year leading up to June last year, compared to about 178 under the last year of the coalition. Okay, so when it comes to illegal immigrants, this is another example of where the coalition is slightly better than Labor. Okay? Now, look, this is bad. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of crooks to be letting out. But still, always make sure you zoom out and look at the bigger picture and, remember it's those legal plane arrivals that are really making the difference here.
Yeah,
Um,
to be honest, a handful of criminals come over on a boat from Indonesia, and I think we've gone over this 1,000 times. It pales in comparison to what you see at Perth Airport. And by the way, for the entire country, just Perth Airport alone, low population, relatively innocuous part of the country. Yeah, we literally go to the airport, you'll see it flooded day in, day out, 24/7 with just the detritus of the world.
Definitely. Yeah, and I saw a story like also saying that something like 1/3 of those who were released from indefinite detention have gone on to reoffend.
Oh no, of course, that's just fucking criminals all the time, and then they go say like, oh god, we should be like Sweden and like do rehabilitation and blah blah blah, and they'll use data from like the 2000s. It's like, okay, but what was the demography of the fucking inmates in fucking like Scandinavian jails during that period of time? Oh, yeah, let's get data from now. Oh, recidivism is up like a whole fucking bunch. In fact, sometimes they even advance to more heinous crimes because they know
Yeah,
they can get away with it.
one important caveat though I should make is that yes, like it was about 1/3 of them had reoffended. However, those offences include breaking curfew, because all of them
Right.
were subject to to a curfew, and they had ankle monitoring bracelets attached to them and that kind of thing.
Well,
They
that's
could,
just an agency problem.
yeah, but I mean, still, I mean, those curfews were there for a reason, and
Mm.
there were violent sex offenders and that involved in it as well. And the government had the right, or they passed a law. This was one of the emergency laws they sort of passed on the fly. Was that in the event that they broke the curfew, they could be jailed for up to a year. And there was a Supreme Court judge who just said that's bullshit. You can't do that. That's ridiculously harsh. Um, okay, now look, something that is up in the air at the moment is exactly what is going to happen with student visas. Now, as we know, there seems to be really the only class of visa that Labor has been willing to target and reduce. They have made it that, for example, your financial capacity to be able to get that visa, the 500 student visa, has to be double what it previously was. So, like, how much money you've got in the bank, you've got to show that you've got enough savings to be financially independent in Australia, and you also get your 20 hours of work a week as well. Now that Tony Burke has taken over both Home Affairs and immigration, um, people are saying that it's a little up in the air as to whether or not Labor will see all of those changes through, or if they'll actually, continue to crack down on it. So I don't know. I haven't read any update on this as of yet. This was really just these are rumblings in the, what you could call the big education lobby. They've made a lot of public statements saying that, they're really, really hoping that Tony Burke won't destroy the foreign student trade here in Australia, which, remember, is one of our biggest industries. It is $40 billion a year. It is massive. Okay,
It's a,
now on the Greens.
that's what, yeah, it's a fucking massive industry. That's why there was so much belly aching when there was even the slightest suggestion that they would touch this fucking shit. That's why literally, like, I think it was like a couple $100 million flooded into politics.
Oh, it was huge, yeah. And that to me, the best thing about COVID was how much it hurt universities.
Oh
That I
yeah,
think that has to be my favorite thing, because yeah, if any industry suffered, it was the foreign student industry. Big education, big universities really had a chunk taken out of them, which was great. They rebounded after that, unfortunately. But yeah, if
mm.
this can hit them again, great. Okay, now on the Greens. Uh, a lot of these stories that I'm reading from the Greens I've actually taken from this ongoing series that's being run in the Australian, which is designed to shine a light on the policies of the Greens that are, say, less talked about. The people don't really recognize the Greens for. People recognize them for being the party of rent control and carbon taxes and other environmental policy. But there's other things they may not be so familiar with. And so the Australian has pointed out that one of them is that they're very, very critical of the current Labor government for bringing too little Palestinians in. Now, I don't know what the figures are at the moment. I know that in the months that came after October 7, Australia was handing out a lot of visitor visas, 600 visas.
Yes,
I think.
yeah.
And the coalition were making a big stink about how, look, a lot of them could be Hamas fighters, or Hamas adjacent or whatever. We pointed out when we covered that story that more visas had actually been allocated to Israeli Jews. And you got to ask why. They didn't have a massive full-scale offensive from a foreign
Your
army.
motherfuckers weren't getting bombed.
No, I mean you did on October 7. You weren't bombed, but 1,200 people. So did die or thereabouts, over 1,000 anyway. But yeah, why all of a sudden would more Israelis need to have these visas? It was very, very curious. So the Greens want an increase there, but also they just want an overall increase in our humanitarian intake. That currently sits at 20,000 per year. So that's 20,000 people who are eligible for, one of those refugee and humanitarian visas, like protection visas.
Did you see the little article I sent you in Grindr DMs that we have between us now? In the secret chat, where they're literally like at this point, proposing a fucking bill explicitly to basically take Palestinians out of that pool and give them their own separate humanitarian visa.
Oh no, I didn't hear about that, but wouldn't surprise.
Yeah, again, I was like speaking to some of the guys there on Grindr, that is, and they're like, I said like, look, how long ago did Finney and I say this? Like literally a year ago, or coming up to a fucking year ago.
Why did I not put that in the prep? Hold on, let's do a.
Because normally I just shit post in there.
We'll do a bit of a live react. I know where you put it, so I will
bring it up.
See if I can bring it up. Oh shit! Why can I not? I can't find. If you've got it, send it to me.
Okay.
I'm running through our chat and I can't seem to find it. Okay, so you found it?
Yep. All right. So just the gist of it is that there is legislation by the suggested by the current Labor government to allow a separate population pool Palestinians to apply for humanitarian visas that won't affect the population cap of the standard humanitarian visa. Now, Finian, do we predict this?
Yeah. So, I mean, what it's saying is like this would be in addition to the 20,000 humanitarian visas that we already hand out. Yeah. So that is the Labor government implementing these radical Greens policies.
Well, again, it's literally Zionist geopolitics at this point. It had to happen. I mean, how many fucking Jewish leaders around the world have said that? Yeah, we need to resettle. Like, we can't kill them all. We need to resettle these people in Canada, the US, UK, and in Europe and Australia. And guess what we're seeing? Like the rabbi talks and the state follows.
Right, and I was actually a good old Syrian girl. She had there was this rally in Israel where they were talking about the riots in the UK that, broke out after the stabbing of those girls. Hugely triggering incident. But anyway, this was a whole bunch of Jews that were celebrating the riots, and they were celebrating the fact that Muhammad is the most popular name in Britain. And they said there should be lots of Mohammeds in Britain, Sweden, and France. Not here, not here. So that's Jews openly saying, yes, we want Western white countries to be flooded with Arab Muslims so that we can get rid of them. Sometimes they openly
just
say
remember,
it and celebrate.
Yeah, like ethno-nationalism for them, it's not for you. It's like fucking, give an example. One singular Jew, one singular Jewish person doing this one thing. I'm not attributing it to all Jews. I'm just saying this one singular Jewish person does that. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Chuck Schumer in America loves abortion rights, loves free and open abortion. Now, you could talk about who uses abortion the most in America, but that's kind of beside the point, because when he's in Israel, he funds quite literally the group that keeps the abortion death panel alive.
Oh, didn't you know it's actually white liberals who want to kill black people? That's the real reason for abortion in America.
No, they're the real racists.
Right. Bloody Margaret Sanger. Okay, and yeah, more on the Greens' radical policies as we go through the show. Okay, now there were two cases pending at, I believe, the federal court, the Australian federal court, and these were filed by foreign drug offenders arguing that their incarceration, immigration detention is unlawful. I think we went through one of them. One of them was from Poland. So this is a guy who, he just got out of jail, but then he was like immediately put back in immigration detention. Now, as a way of sort of preempting this, I don't know how this works. I'd have to get someone familiar with the law and how all of this works. But what the government is doing is actually elevating both of those cases from the federal court to the high court, because for whatever reason, they feel that the Commonwealth has a better chance at defeating these cases in the high court. Now, the problem there, obviously, is that once you bring it to the high court, there's no further court of appeal. So this could backfire on the government. What if these two drug dealers are found in favor of by the high court? Well, the only way you can fix things then is literally through a referendum. Okay? If you're talking about something that's constitutional that the high court is arguing over, well, that can only be changed via constitutional amendment through a referendum. So this is a big gamble that the government is taking. They're trying not to be caught on the back foot again, where they suddenly have hundreds of immigration detainees just suddenly released because of a court hearing. And for whatever reason, they think they've got a better chance of fighting that in the high court. But I would have to laugh if they lost it. I would. I mean, not that it's a funny issue. You'd be talking about, dangerous criminals being released. But it would just kind of show like what a joke this whole system has become. Okay. Now, some rare white pills for you, although what I'm about to read is a little bit of a mixed bag, but on the whole, I think this is positive. So this was a poll conducted by The Australian. It's called the Australians' Needs of the Nation poll. And it did specifically cover the topic of immigration. So public support for immigration has nearly halved over the past decade, with half of Australians demanding fewer migrants. Now, when I say it's a mixed bag, it's because, like, for example, when you look at young people are, still the most likely to support immigration. I believe it was only 1 in 4. No, 1 in 5.
I don't know. Like,
welcome more. 41% are happy with the status quo. Well, I'm just going through what this poll is saying. That's all. 1 in 5 want more migration, but 41% want the status quo.
Yeah, I was going to say recently I got introduced to like a social circle of relatively young people, like early 20s, like really early 20s. And the housing affordability came up, and literally all of them, and I'm talking about nearly 20 people here, without prompting, brought up immigration as the problem.
Yeah. But I mean,
I don't think literally there's one thing that fucking that is like a massive sign of status in the current Australian youth, which is the prospect of home ownership. They fucking treat like, you know, fucking getting a home like it's the coming of the Messiah. They quite literally don't see a future anymore. And then at this point, because they don't see a future, they don't see any way that they'll be rewarded for certain opinions and certain behaviors and certain fuck the system, man, type ideas or type talking points. They're literally just basing out to what is the actual fucking problem. They're not dumb. The youth aren't dumb. They're just very, very fucking socially leverageable. Unfortunately, the lever has broken.
Yeah, but I mean, look, you know, many of those people will still be in uni or TAFE or whatever, and, you know, they haven't gone into the real world, so to speak, because they haven't got a real taste of what the labour market is like. I think once they do that,
yeah,
once they
early 20s.
Yeah, once they get jobs and they, you know, they start adulting for real, you know, which is more than just managing your study time, you know, they get a taste of those real problems and their views start to change pretty quickly, I think. So, you know, there's that. But yeah, look, I'll just quickly go through the main findings of this. So 10 years ago, support for higher immigration was 22%. In 2024, it shows that 1 in 3 Australians want immigration to remain where it is, while 50% want a cut to migration. So you can see over that 10-year period, more and more people are being disillusioned with the levels of migration. Demand for lower levels has doubled in the past decade. So in 2014, barely a quarter of Australians wanted fewer migrants. Now it's almost half want fewer migrants. Now, let's give a little credit to the boomers and to an extent the X's as well, because 2/3 of the over 50s want a cut to the immigration rate compared to 26% in 2014. So still, the figures are showing that basically the older you are, so we have to give credit to the boomers to an extent, the older you are, the more likely you are to favour immigration cuts. That's true. I would just say, though, but the boomers are still, they're the ones who were the policymakers, though, when it mattered. And, even if it doesn't represent them as a whole, it was the leadership of the boomer generation that led us to where we are now.
Well, yeah, okay. Unfortunately. Well, it was an inaction in 1972 that really led us to where we are now.
All right, so to put that in the context, I'm talking about studies that were done 10 years apart. These are both of these polls were done by the Australian in 2014 and this year. In the last 10 years, the intake of legal migrants has grown by 37%. And that is due to rising numbers of two particular types of migrants. One is migrants on work visas, and the second is students. So there you go.
Yep.
So that's why tinkering around with the student visa can actually have some large effects. My issue is just that they'll never be permanent. What we're seeing from Labor at the moment is a temporary fix. They'll probably, this is my prediction anyway, with Tony Burke as the new minister, they'll go according to plan where, they'll have those harsher conditions and prerequisites to get on the Student 500 visa. By the time we get into the next government in 2025, it'll be business as usual, I think. They'll ease those restrictions and they'll go back to taking in basically the same amount of students that we did before. Okay. Yeah, because it also it makes the point that other visa categories that used to be, responsible for huge intakes in migration have fallen. So family visas, for example, it's not just about like boomers taking their Thai wives over and then, through chain migration, having her family then move over. No, they're doing it through all these other ones now, work visas and student visas. All right. So we've also got a poll on racism. Now, this was... sorry, I'm just trying to see who actually did this story or who did this study. Anyway, I'll go through the findings of it. So young Australians are the ones most likely for an Indigenous treaty following the failure of the referendum last year. Now, it also found that around 3/4 of Australians, or 3/4 of the people who took part in this survey, say that the country is racist. How about that? I'd like to know who they polled there to arrive at that conclusion.
Big
so 39% of Australians want the government to consider a treaty with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. 38% are opposed to a treaty, and 23% are undecided. And showing that same kind of age pattern, the older you get, the less likely you are to support a treaty. This was part of the same study, the one that I mentioned before called the Needs of the Nation poll that was done by The Australian. And yeah, gee whiz, 72% of respondents describe Australians as racist. Now, I mean, did they conduct this study in like a fucking ESL college or something? Like, how the hell did they get
they conducted this study in the drum circle.
Yeah. Down in Marks.
They conducted this study in the Joe Rogan Appreciators Club.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, this is coming from The Australian. This is the Murdoch press that we're getting this from.
Well, again, I think...
do you remember that show on SBS called Dumb, Drunk and Racist?
No.
It had, I'm sure you would have seen at least one of the clips. It had Joe Hildebrand on it. And there's this scene where like a bunch of drunk Aboriginals start chasing them and throwing stuff at them. Anyway, it was called Dumb, Drunk and Racist. And they basically took a bunch of Indians around Australia to get the full Australia.
Oh, fuck yes. Yeah, I remember this one. Oh, yeah. This was so fucking bad.
And even those Indians, right, they've said Australians are not dumb. They are drunk, but they're not racist. So even these Indians said, no, we don't think Australians are racist. They said we were just drunk. That's all, because they did witness a lot of, alcohol.
We'll take that.
Yeah, sure, we'll take that. But don't call us dumb and racist. We're okay if you call us racist. But yeah, I mean, look, at the least, you'd have to say that from that you would conclude that social cohesion can't be at great levels if most people think we are a racist country. Oh, one other trend. The more money you have, the more likely you are to support a treaty.
Wonder why that is. Would there be investment opportunities in Indigenous corporations?
Okay, let's turn to, well, what is our only story on the economy today? This is on the annual inflation rate. So it moved from 3.8%, and that is up from 3.6% from the start of the year. Okay, now maybe you're like me and you got a bit confused and you said to yourself, hey, wait a minute, I thought the inflation rate was 4%. So did I. I thought it was 4%. And when I read about this increase to 3.8%, I was like, huh? So what you might be thinking of is the trimmed measure of inflation, which is a measure of underlying or core inflation the Reserve Bank focuses on. And that actually fell slightly. That went from 4% to 3.9%. But the overall Australian annual inflation rate has gone from 3.6 to 3.8%. So, in other words, that's sort of more the inflation rate that you should care about. Now, as always happens when we hear about an increase in inflation, people start talking about interest rates. The coalition also took it as an opportunity to attack Labor over an inflationary budget that they put down in May. And considering it's August now, you could definitely argue that the flow-on effects from that budget would start to be felt. And perhaps this is an indication of that it is having an inflationary impact. Now, if we're looking at, the coalition actually predicted that there would be another 2 interest rate rises before the next election. Now, that could be fatal for the Albanese government. The Libs have already been tracking better in the polls. Albo's likability is going down. Peter Dutton still does not score very high for likability, but I don't think that really matters when people go to the polls. But yeah, if you see the Teals maintaining their voter base, and if you see an increase in support for the Greens, and if you see the running of Muslim vote independent candidates, you might find that all of these independents and minor parties start to take seats away from Labor, and they become reliant upon them in a hung parliament to form a minority government. And yeah, I think that perhaps the biggest threat or the biggest indication of that happening would be further interest rate rises when people actually hurt at the hip pocket. Okay, let's turn to industrial relations. As I mentioned, the new IR minister is Murray Watt. I just read today that they've kind of announced the makeup of like what is going to be the independent administration of the CFMEU. As to whether or not, the officials in the CFMEU are going to be completely cooperative with that administration is another question. Dare I say they will not be. But Murray Watt has said that it would take years for the CFMEU to fully reform itself and for meaningful change to be implemented. And that might even mean, it'll take years to flush out the organised crime element that, we're told exists within the union. I just basically thought this was confirmation that, bikies have day jobs. That's all. And some of them happen to work on construction sites. And I really, like, the takeaway I had from that 60 Minutes episode was that, like, bikies don't deserve to have jobs, which I think is what I called the show. Like, no jobs for bikies or something.
Yeah, well, the bikies don't deserve, no jobs for bikies. Which you should also watch, because we're a good show. We do interesting content. It's not that you go away from every single one of our episodes completely and utterly fucking depressed.
Well, we've had a couple of white pills so far, which this would definitely, on average, make this one of our more optimistic episodes, considering we usually have none. So, So there you go.
Mhm.
No, but if you do want a bit, because we actually spent about 40 minutes discussing the CFMEU last
Yes.
episode. So you can, check that out if you want a bit more in-depth coverage on that. But it's now basically become fashionable. It's become cool to rip on the CFMEU, or at least again. Every now and then, it's that fad comes back into fashion, I think. Because someone who was actually somewhat, sympathetic before was David Pocock, the only teal that we have in the federal Senate.
David Gluck
He
Gluck.
actually voted, huh?
David Gluck Gluck.
So, well, David Pocock, he voted to abolish the ABCC, the construction watchdog, which it wasn't entirely abolished. I've got to point that out. Like, it was just sort of like some of the more like the independent powers were stripped away from it, you could say. But there's still a building regulator that goes after the union. They're still there, still exist. But anyway, he is now like leading this charge to clean up the union. And he's basically said, well, you know what? That thing that I voted to abolish, maybe we should have it back. And, this would really give like the Master Builders Association a win. What they want is bipartisan support for the ABCC, for the construction industry watchdog, and all of its powers that it used to hold to be brought back again. And definitely, if the coalition win the next election, that's going to happen. Peter Dutton's been very explicit on that. And it looks like now that even if the Senate isn't completely on his side, they would be willing to support him over a new construction industry watchdog, because you'd be able to get those crossbenchers on your side. Okay, now another example of why it's just cool to go after him. The opposition in Queensland, the LNP, have questioned why the CFMEU official was appointed to the state's Work, Health and Safety Board. This was an individual who was fined individually $30,000, and the union as a whole was fined $179,000 for entry breaches. Basically, when they're not allowed access to a work site, but they walk on it anyway.
Yeah.
Joe McDonald.
Total thug behavior.
Sand gropers might remember the tactics of Joe McDonald. That was basically what made him famous here in WA. He was the number 2 guy in the CFMEU, and he was endlessly racking up fines for illegal entry of work sites.
But he was into scat play.
He was what?
Was he into scat play?
Oh, Jesus, man. Why does your mind go there?
He's the number 2 guy. Okay, I'm sorry.
The number 1 guy, by the way, is Mick Buchan. So he is the leader of the WA branch. And as he pointed out, I think I read the statement last time, no allegations by Channel 9 or 60 Minutes or any of those columns that came out actually related to the WA branch. None. Nonetheless, it's still in fashion for our Premier, our Labor Premier, Roger Cook. He made an announcement where they're going to introduce a fit and proper person test for union representatives seeking access to work sites. So, otherwise, this would mean even more of those fines for entry breaches would be handed out. So that means all of these union officials would have to pass this new test to be able to get permission to walk on site. Details of that, I don't know. I'll have to wait and see. But it's fashionable now just to be tough on the CFMEU. Okay, now this one I found interesting. The next 2 stories here. So the CFMEU donated around $200,000 And this was to fund the election campaign of a Melbourne councillor. Now, you probably thought I was going to say like a Melbourne MP, but no, this was a Melbourne councillor. And I mean, I remember last week we were talking about donations that the CFMEU gives to the Labor Party or other candidates. And I remember that for the Queensland branch of the Labor Party, CFMEU donated $73,000. And that was considered by a lot of people to be a lot of money. Well, this is $200,000 for a councillor. It's not even going to the party or the MP. It's going to one councillor. So who is this woman? So she's a union official, Elizabeth Doige. I might be saying that wrong. Doidge.
Doige. Doge would be Doge. Is Doge sometimes spelled like that? That's Dutch, but I don't know. Actually,
yeah, and this was for her run in the city of Melbourne back in 2020. Now, further to that, the Australian revealed that the Victorian Planning Minister, Sonia Kilkenny, has had a private high-level talk with Elizabeth Doige about planning and infrastructure in Victoria. And also, Elizabeth Doige has been described by various people talking to the Australian, so anonymous sources talking to the Australian, as a political mastermind. So, yeah, I've got a question like, what exactly is going on here? Why have the CFMEU put so much money behind a single councillor who apparently has access to Victorian ministers and is described as a political mastermind? I don't know.
I think we're hearing some political espionage here. A little political workaround, if you catch my drift.
Maybe they're thinking she is just some like super great representative of the union that will make it into federal parliament eventually, and it's just worth backing this horse early in the race. I don't know, but that is an enormous amount of money for. That would be an enormous amount of money even for a federal MP for the CFMEU to donate. This is for a single councillor. So, yeah, it's very unusual. Okay, what a surprise there is still a rising gap between pay and conditions in some sectors of our economy compared to others. So this... where was this? Sorry, I'm just trying to find... This was some report that came out that the ABC reported on. But anyway, look, what it found was the sectors of the economy that tend to be like staying stagnant in terms of conditions and wages tend to be like, you know, the quick click economy, you know, your Uber Eats and, your Uber whatever service.
Uber, yeah.
Basically, you know, any of these services where you just want to snap your fingers and have that good or that service provided to you instantly.
And the brown slaves come and they serve you, master. For $29, including service fee, you get your brown slave to bring you McDonald's.
Right. So these
your brown little temporary manservant.
Would you remember they were described as the young brown men by David Leyonhjelm?
Oh,
the former Liberal Democrat senator. So, you know, he was a guy I was willing to say nice things about until he made that speech.
Yep.
And, yeah, he was basically talking about the slave labour that we have imported into Australia, putting Australians out of work, driving their wages down. He was just openly celebrating that in the Senate. But anyway, it seems like it's getting worse here. Even when... They're pointing out that, okay, now we are currently in this transition with the new IR laws of moving people from the gig economy into casual labor. But still, even really when you become a casual worker, you know, on average, you get a 25% loading on your wages. And that's because you don't accumulate things like sick pay and annual leave. So, it makes sense that you get a little bit more money. But according to research in the UK, that should actually be at minimum 33%. So even if you're lucky enough to move from the gig economy into casual employment, you're still getting screwed. And the gap is still widening between those sectors. So, and I don't think it's any coincidence that it's always hospitality workers, or if you're involved somehow in the hospitality industry, you're screwed over. It's no coincidence that hospitality is basically not unionized at all in Australia. Any attempts to
what skills, what bottleneck can hospitality workers put in place to stop them from being infinitely replaceable?
Yeah, I know. But I just mean
not to shit on hospitality workers, but seriously, look at your situation.
No, I look at them and I say, you sort of answered the question there, but I do often kind of say, why don't you guys unionize? It's the only way you're going to, actually get some better conditions for yourselves. I've never worked in hospitality, but I've known shitloads of people who have. And they've always got there was one girl who told me that when she was an apprentice chef, her boss, the head chef, when he got angry, he would throw utensils at staff, hit them on the head with flying fucking spoons and shit. I've heard stories like that before.
I straight up heard about a cigarette being put out in the back of a fucking, was it what's that second, demi chef or some shit like that? I can't remember. Basically entry level, non kind of apprentice, non-skilled chef. I heard of a cigarette being put out on the back of their neck. That's one of the horror stories I've heard. Fuck it, just horrific shit, by the way, and it's not a safe environment, and people use drugs to cope with it, which definitely not ideal in our books. Actually really far from fucking ideal.
Considering they work a lot of crazy hours, and the typical shift is 12 hours long, so it wouldn't be surprising if they do what the truckies do and load up on some amphetamine or something.
I was gonna say, did you hear that AI generated song my big old truck and a fistful of meth?
No, I didn't, but
it's great.
Okay, so we got a few IR stories today. Now, here's an example of a union that does have some real clout and that, could cause some damage if it were to take strike action. And that is the Australian Federal Police Union. Now, Parliament is due to resume on the 12th, so a week away. And it looks like it might have to be delayed because they're threatening strike action right at the beginning of the new parliamentary sitting. Now, I did also read recently that, I don't know if this came from the AFP, but apparently the threats against federal politicians in Australia have doubled in the past year. Now, a lot of that would have to do with October 7, I'm sure. But nonetheless, if threats go up, you would naturally believe that security detail needs to go up. If they need security detail at bloody council meetings because of Greens members making inflammatory speeches, then, safe to assume they would need extra security for our politicians. So that is actually an area where the AFP can, hit you where it hurts. If they walk off the job, who's going to step in for them? So, yeah, real interesting to see what happens there. But anyway, what this is about, their union voted in support of further industrial action. That can include at airports as well. They provide a lot of the security there. So this is in a bid to pressure the AFP to lift its pay offer, which right now consists of 11.2% in wage increases over 3 years. So, the union is saying that's not good enough. At the moment, they want more. So let's see what happens. It's only a week away for the new parliamentary sitting. It'll be interesting. Okay. All right, so unions will push for restrictions on part-time work, including 4-hour minimum shifts and 28 days advance notice of rosters. So this is during a major review of part-time employment conducted by the Fair Work Commission. 28 days advance notice of a roster. I don't know. That's a lot. That's
what?
a whole month. That's
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know if you
fucking
need that much.
February.
Yeah, that's a bit. That's pushing it a bit too far. Now, the minimum for okay. I remember when I first started working when I was a teenager. I was really get the shits when I was just assigned like a 2 or 3 hour shift because I worked in the city and I was like, I've got to go all the way to the city just to work like 2 hours and come back again. Like that can get irritating. So I can understand why they want a 4 hour minimum. But yeah, anyway, this is part of the demands that Labor is going to be putting on Labor. None of this would come to fruition until the next election cycle, I'm sure, considering that Tony Burke already pushed through a raft of changes. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. Now, here's an interesting story. Why the hell would I put this in IR? This is to do with churches. Now, this was a productivity commission recommendation that said a government agency would be allowed to appoint and remove a priest from a parish or a religious leader from a religious charity.
Well, don't you know that IR stands for Interests of Religions?
Oh, great.
Come on, you don't pay me for good stand-up. In fact, I don't get paid at all.
No, God no. Volunteer work. Yeah, that's the lowest paid work, isn't it? The minimum wage laws apply.
I'm a schmuck. These fucking
do it out of
schmuck goyim, they do it for free. We're fucking Jannies, Finian. We're fucking Jannies.
No, I do this because it's therapeutic. If I didn't yell this shit into a microphone every week,
oh, you'd fucking detonate. You'd go off like a human hand grenade.
This is my therapy.
It'll boil inside of you, and they'll find your limbs like fucking 5 blocks away.
So look, obviously, church groups and the religious lobby are very much opposed to this. But look, I cannot imagine Labor implementing this. Effectively, them taking control of hiring and firing of religious institutions. I just can't see that happening. And why on earth the Productivity Commission made this recommendation in the first place, that's beyond me. Anyway. Okay. Last thing on IR. I'm sure we've all heard that Rex Airlines has effectively collapsed. I believe their regional flights are still going, though, but all of the flights between Australia's capital cities have ended. So it's around, I think it's over 600 people are going to be put out of work as a result of this. Presumably, I'd say that, the regional flights are going to be cancelled as well, and that'll mean even more people will be out of work. So the government is now talking about cracking down on the anti-competitive practices of Qantas and Virgin, who are effectively dominating, who basically control the domestic flight industry here in Australia. And I know that there were all sorts of things basically stopping Rex Airlines from accessing the airports in the capital cities in Australia. I don't know. You might know more about that than me, Nolsey, but I do know that basically any competitor to Qantas and Virgin that has tried entering the market is quite quickly pushed out again. And Rex is no exception to that.
So. Isn't Qantas literally so much of a fucking weird monopoly in the domestic Australian market that they make weird little offshoots just for fun?
Quite possibly, yeah. I mean, that's like, in Australia, how we've got like Swan Taxi, and then there's like a million other like little ones, like taxi companies. It's all Swan Taxi. It's an illusion. It creates an illusion of competition. That's why they do it. You know. Okay. Let's move on to housing. Here's another one of the radical Greens policies. I'll let you be the judge on how radical this is. So their spokesman I'm talking about the Greens. I should be saying spokesperson, shouldn't I? Max Chandler.
Spokes homosexual.
So Max Chandler Mather, he's one of the MPs. So he's in the lower house. I believe he's in a Queensland seat, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, he is the one talking about housing and renting and all of that. He says that, of course, they want things like rent control. They want reforms to negative gearing, anything they can to push rental prices down for renters. And he said, that would even mean pushing down the value of your house. So if you're an investor or simply just a humble homeowner, he's saying, I want to depreciate the value of your property so that I can push rental prices down. Whew, I don't know that. I don't see that as actually so radical because,
No.
I mean, property prices have been artificially inflated. We just keep pumping air into the property bubble year after year with increased immigration.
We keep pumping fucking Brigittes into the property bubble.
Now the
property bubble is not full of air; it's full of Indians.
Right, and this is the primary reason why the Greens' policies here won't work, because they refuse to touch on immigration. In fact, they did offer comment to the Australian about this radical policy, and they completely reject the idea that the prime cause of rent increases and property price increases in Australia is immigration. They refuse to acknowledge that. I remember Adam Bandt saying that like tax cuts for investors was actually what was fueling that in Australia. Fucking man, come on. How on earth could you actually push down property prices or rent prices or whatever
dude.
without actually dealing with immigration? You can't. And the Greens just pretend.
You want to hear a bigger cope? Because I got one for you. Fucking Friendly Geordie's line, which is like, oh my god, it's greedy property developers that are like fucking doing slow releases on their property to mark up the price so they can get bigger profits. It's like, no one is fucking building houses. The houses are not being fucking built in the first place. What the fuck do you think is happening?
Right. Yeah.
They also want property developers they brag about how quickly they sell all their properties because they want capital now, not capital in 6 months. That's
a shame. Like, I thought maybe Friendly Geordies was sort of seeing the light, like going after the Israeli lobby and going after Drew Pavlou, the ever-inflating Drew Pavlou. But no,
Drew Pavlou is quickly developing the fucking the symptoms of Cushing's disease.
Yeah, that put simply, that cunt gets fatter every time I see him. Anyway,
he fucking sustains himself on cringe. He grows plump off the cringe.
Have you seen his Telegram page? It's all like, most of it is like stuff. It's like scam investment stuff on crypto and stuff like that. And each one gets like views of like 5 people. I know his main audience is on Twitter, but still, like, just have a look at his Telegram page if you want a good laugh.
Someone should reply to Drew Pavlou, or at least like actually a whole bunch of dudes. If we're all listening, anytime that Drew Pavlou puts out a message, you should reply to him with 7 days free.
Okay, now
only real motherfuckers will know what that means.
Claire O'Neill was moved from Home Affairs to Housing. That, I think, unquestionably is a demotion. But anyway, she said that she is prioritizing delivery of the supply of housing in Australia. So this, again, is ignoring the immigration problem. I'd have to I don't have these numbers in front of me, but I do remember that it was around 1.25 million houses that Labor wanted to build, not to free up, but to build in the next 2 years or so. How the fuck are you going to do that? You won't. Even with the huge amount of immigration that we have and the large amount of work visas and skilled work visas that we're handing out, we still don't have building companies with the capacity to build these houses. But nonetheless, she is saying that that is her number one promise as the new housing minister, is to increase supply. Nothing there. When I read through this article, she said nothing about the impact of immigration on housing, and therefore the supply of housing.
No, it's one of the things. It's one of the things that will never be talked about in the halls of power, but will be talked about in the halls of houses, pubs, and clubs, and social gatherings of any stripe.
Right.
Because, by the way, when I was talking about young 20-year-olds, I'm talking about a group that you'd normally assume would be left-leaning faggots.
Well, I was about to say that even when you look at polls of Labor voters, most of them say that they believe immigration is contributing to out-of-control prices, not just in housing, but across the board. Even Labor voters believe that. Okay.
God damn.
So in New South Wales, they're introducing the end of no grounds, no fault evictions. So this is where, you just suddenly get a notice that you're being evicted from your rental property, and the landlord doesn't have to give a reason for it. So now they've made it that if they can still evict you, of course, but they have to give you a good enough reason. So some of those reasons could be the sale of the property, or the offer for sale with vacant possession, when the owner or their family members intends to move in. Existing rules like breach of lease, non-payment of rent, damage to the property, etc. Significant repairs, renovations, or demolition, or the property is no longer being used as a rental. So yeah, you can't just kick someone out just because you want to. And yeah, I guess that's fair enough. Let me just add here, well, I don't know this for sure, but I'm willing to bloody bet on it, that one of the reasons why they've had to introduce these laws is the same reason that they had to reform rental laws in Victoria about 3 years ago. And that is because you have more and more foreign investment, more and more non-whites buying up investment properties in Australia, and then treating their tenants like shit. That was exactly what happened in Victoria, where they had cases of people renting out beds, not rooms, but beds within a room. So they had to step in.
Remember ages ago when we covered the fucking Malaysians who were renting out bunks for periods of time? They had 18 in a small flat just down fucking Nankatel over here. Remember that?
Yeah,
I remember that. They probably wouldn't even bust them these days.
Doing that is an exclusively Southeast Asian thing to do. Just piling people in, squeezing them into a tiny, tiny area. Because, a lot of them do actually live like that in Southeast Asia. They have very high population density. And so, not a surprise that they bring that over here. And so some of them end up being the owners of these houses and treating tenants like crap. So, yeah, that's why I would say that would be at least one of the drivers that made these laws necessary. Okay, let's move on to climate and energy. So, on the Greens again, and this time the Queensland Greens. So they would be demanding a ban on new coal mines and gas projects and an earlier shutdown of coal-fired power. And that would be if they hold the balance of power in the election this year, which is due to be in October. Okay, well, look, breathe a sigh of relief here. Labor are not going to be elected this October. I cannot see Queensland voting for Stephen Miles. I just can't see it happening. Not that David Crisafulli would be much better or any better, for that matter, but I do believe that the LNP are going to win this election. But the Greens MP Amy McMahon, she ousted the former Labor Premier Jackie Trad. So, this was one of those red ribbon seats, say Labor seats, but due to increased gentrification and hipsterisation of the seat of South Brisbane, the Greens were able to take that in 2020. So they would also push for rent freezes for 2 years. Right? So that's not just rent control, that's a rent freeze, like an overall freeze on rent increases.
Fuck it, it's time for some ball busting. I don't care if you fucking wheel out some geriatric landlord and do some like hearts and mind shit. Like I'm sick of it at this point. I'm a radical leftist. Fuck your small slum.
Okay, so they'd also go for a price cap on 30 essential grocery items, the dismantling of Coles and Woolworths supermarket duopoly, and a public property developer to spend $60 billion on 100,000 social homes in 6 years. I know
that last one's going to turn to the fucking projects, man.
That's exactly what it means. What they call dem projects in America. You're talking about high density, crime and drug addled, high density housing with a whole bunch of people who are going to fight with each other. What the fuck do you expect that to turn into? And that's why, here in WA, it's sort of changing now, but they did give up on social housing blocks, and instead what they did was just have houses, and they would disperse them throughout the suburbs. So you can even find social housing.
Cookie cutter, no back. Well, these days it's cookie cutter, no backyard, fucking no nothing. Nothing you can really fuck up too bad. Very few actual windows type deals. I actually fucking hate that because my old suburb they live in, they just approved it. It means meth. It means dealing with meth heads. It means figuring out how to deal with meth heads. It means learning the life lesson of why the fuck you shouldn't live around meth heads.
Even in a suburb like Claremont, which, if you don't know, is one of our very rich suburbs, there's even social housing there in Claremont, right? Now, I still think that is preferable to shoving, building this massive apartment block and just putting a whole bunch of poor and destitute people all in that same space. What do you think is going to happen? Because I used to live next door to, it wasn't an apartment block, but it was a whole bunch of houses, social housing put next to each other. You probably visited a couple of times, Knowlesy, back then. But they ended up demolishing it. And as soon as they demolished it, I stopped hearing the police sirens.
Oh yeah, I still remember back in the day. I used to be sitting in the fucking studio, and there'll just be a fucking police car pull up across the road.
Yeah.
That one time you got fucking some dude came up and was very obviously a drug dealer and knocked on your door. It was like, "Hey man, did you order this?" Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, that was so that was when those houses were still around.
I used to make sure when I pulled up to your place, I used to make sure my car was definitely fucking locked.
Yeah. No, we did have our back fence actually got broken because we had a bunch of guys who stole a car. They dumped it in a park near our house, and then they ran through our backyard and they destroyed our asbestos fence. That was the only time though that we ever had any trouble. It could have been worse.
What's worse,
just
going
grateful we didn't get robbed
killing a car or lung cancer in your 40s.
Yeah. But no, that guy, he knocked on my door. And this was before I was on Telegram, right? He said to me, "Hey man, was I talking to you on Telegram?" And I was like, "What?" And he goes, "Did you order a stick?" I'm like, "No." And he holds up a bag of weed in front of me. And then the guy, there was another guy, there was an Aboriginal guy in the car. And I heard him yell from the car. He goes, no, this one, man, this one. And he comes back, and then they went to this house across the road from me. And like that was the house that ordered the weed. Yeah. But it was like a weekly occurrence that I would hear the cops or see the cops. Like I saw them like tackling people and shit. You know, all sorts of fucking shit happens at these places. And the Greens say, hey, you know what? Let's make even more of them live in close proximity to each other in bigger apartment blocks. That's a real good idea.
I remember my fucking late brother used to live in fucking Westminster. And dude, Jesus fucking Christ. Like that was the Aboriginal ethno state. That was fucking Great Arnhem Land. That was little Great Arnhem Land. Like fucking like if you want to deal with like Aboriginal, like it was a high enough density of Aboriginals that they stopped speaking English and just went back to those guttural fucking growls that they shout across each other from one side of the parking lot to the other. It was like feral hour after sundown. If the sun went down, it was like fucking you could probably see one of them naked sprinting into the forest. Like fucking Jesus, man. Westminster in the fucking early aughts was a fucking nightmare.
Yeah, and look, dare I say, most of these Greens members and Greens voters, they haven't lived near places like that. They have no experience of what it's actually like. So they support these harebrained projects. Okay, anyway, back to climate and energy. Someone who just remained in their portfolio was Tanya Plibersek. Some people were, expecting her to be put into a more senior portfolio, but no, she's remained in environment. Now, they're looking to pass new nature protection reforms. And the business lobby is pressuring Labor to work in a bipartisan fashion with the coalition on those laws rather than seeking crossbench support, which means Greens support. Now, the reason for this is because when it comes to the kinds of nature protection reforms that the Greens want to introduce, they want them to carry what's called a climate trigger. Now, a climate trigger basically means that if you're planning to build a place that would emit X amount of CO2, you either can't build it in the first place, or you're going to be subject to a cap or a carbon tax. So it works very much in the same way as what we call the safeguard mechanism, which I always have to remind people was introduced by the Abbott government. Climate tax by stealth. Basically, certain companies and certain projects that they had, if they emitted over a certain amount, they had to start paying to emit more. That's a carbon tax. That's a carbon price. So this would be another form of a carbon tax applied to projects that would, threaten nature protection in Australia. So, yeah, this is one area where, I'd side with the business lobby on this. The last thing we need is more of these covert carbon taxes, carbon prices. God knows we've got enough already.
Okay. God knows we're fucking paying for it.
Yep. Oh, now, speaking of paying for it, shit, we're quite literally here. So 19 protesters who were banned from entering more than 800,000 hectares of public forest are due to have their legal costs reimbursed to them. So these are people who were protesting over, as you can imagine, the logging of old growth forests. The company involved in the logging set up barriers and would have some of these protesters charged with trespass over these lands. Well, a court ruling has found that they had no jurisdiction over those lands and that these areas that the protesters were accessing or trying to access were in fact public, and therefore they had a right to protest there. So, all of the legal costs involved in that to those 19 protesters are going to be reimbursed. by the company involved, which is Sustainable Timber Tasmania. How about that? I love how they still have to call themselves sustainable. Like they still put the climate signaling in their name.
What's that fucking rating called? The FS, was it FSP rating? The fucking sustainable for like forestry sustainable sustain project, or what was it? Like it's the FSP rating, and it's like how sustainable a piece of wood is, and like you actually, it's like, oh yes, it's like number 1's the best and number 5's the worst. So it's like fucking walnut or some shit. And then you actually look at like how they get these ratings. It's like, yeah, we're not going to obliterate this forest in like the next decade, so it's the number 1.
Oh, okay. No, I have not really heard of that. Yeah, I mean, look, if I've got anything good to say about these people, I'll say that they were the original environmental activists who were concerned about old growth logging. Not just in Tasmania, but around Australia. And they were people who actually did live in those areas, and they were going after what was a tangible cause, not like all the crap they're concerned about today. Nonetheless, I'm still pro logging on the whole. All right, it delivers like plenty of blue collar jobs, and you know who else is really, really pro logging in Tasmania? The CFMEU. In fact, that was one of the things that fucked Labor in the 2004 election when Mark Latham was leader, was that Latham actually cozied up to Bob Brown, the leader of the Greens at the time, and he went against the Labor government in Tasmania and the CFMEU in Tasmania because they were very pro-logging because, well, without it, the forestry sector of the CFMEU, that is basically what the F is all about in CFMEU. It's forestry workers in Tasmania. Without them, there is no F in the CFMEU. So they told Latham to get fucked back then, and I think that was the right thing to do.
Well,
Labor is supposed to be about preserving blue-collar jobs, aren't they?
It's in the name, right? It's Labor, right? I mean, like... And also, again, dude, fucking, how fucking long, actually, even on the industrial scale, how fucking long have humans been cutting down fucking trees for the production of lumber? Yes, you can look at satellite maps and see that during the early parts of industrialization was low, and then during the later parts of industrializations, you actually had return of, green and fucking forest. Unfortunate old growth, because old growth takes time. But then again, proper forestry and proper eco-biodiversity and also like in balance with tree farms, you can do this sustainably. This is fine. It can be done.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay.
We're talking about giant sticks of cellulose here, friends. It's not too hard to keep them going.
Right. I mean, basic law of supply and demand will say that if there's a large demand for timber, well, you have to actually create the supply, don't you? So companies do have a financial incentive to plant new trees and create that new supply. I know that there's that old growth forest debate, which is a little separate from it. But if you're still if you're just talking about the amount of trees, they're not under threat.
Yeah, the old growth. The thing with the old growth shit is they talk about like diverse ecology, like do you have like mushroom species, insect species, bird species, and etc. And then obviously in forest farms where it's all the one same species of tree and whatnot, it's very hard for shit to set up there, like mushrooms, birds, insects, etc. So yeah, so you'll notice, go ask this is a good one actually, this everyone should do this across the entire world, by the way. Everyone should do this. Go ask your grandparents or your eldest living family member if they had to clean their windscreen after driving through the countryside, and then you drive through the countryside and see if you need to clean your windscreen. That's going to be very telling. It's going to be very telling.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the towns known for logging here in WA is Pemberton. I assume you've been there, Nolsey.
Dwelling Up. I went to Dwelling Up. That's another one.
Okay. Well, look, I went to last time I was there was about 3 years ago, I think, And believe me, there is no shortage of forest there.
There was a Negro at the pub in Dwelling Up.
Really? No, when I went
Yes,
there,
this
it was
was
a very
years
wide
ago.
experience. It was great getting away.
There was specifically a negress.
Okay. I don't remember seeing any Negroes when I was in Pemberton last.
Day ruined.
Okay, so well, here's something that the environmental activists are not celebrating, and that is that the federal government has opened waters off the Victorian and Tasmanian coast for new gas exploration. Now, this was part of Labor's announcement that the use of gas, that evil fossil fuel, will continue past 2050. So originally they were saying that, the use of gas was simply just like a transitory form of fossil fuels as we wean ourselves off coal onto renewables. Well, Labor actually eventually had the sense to say, no, that's not practical. We need to keep using gas even beyond 2050, even when we get to that date where we're supposedly meant to meet net zero. And that has meant, the opening up of increased gas exploration on the shores of Australia. So, one very small white pill, I guess.
Yeah, or no, dude, that's because, like, Jesus fucking Christ. And, like, I know I've harped on about this over and over again, but we nearly lost a contract with the world's biggest fucking oceanic liquid natural gas fucking extraction ship, the Ragnarok. We were so fucking close for that thing. Fucking off to literally anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, well, look, I think Labor is also terrified that we're going to run out of short-term supplies of gas during winter periods as well, because as we've covered, there is already a shortage in Victoria right now. So that's another thing, and the moment you start actually getting brownouts and blackouts as a result of a low gas supply, that's where voters get very, very angry. Okay. And Labor would definitely be hurting at the ballot box as a result of that. Okay, just a quick story on the use of AI in political ads. So to do with Peter Dutton's support for nuclear power, there was some like really shitty, cheesy AI video made of Peter Dutton dancing and talking about the nuclear policy. But at the same time, I watched it. It wasn't very good. At the same time, the Queensland Premier, Stephen Miles, he's also had some AI video being posted around the LNP's social media. So it's working both ways. And, well, guess we can only expect to see more of it.
You'll be embarrassed when my AI makes a more cringe video than your AI.
Okay, and last story on climate and energy. Over in Tasmania, where you've got the only Liberal government in the country, there was a text message from the Energy Minister, Nick Dugan, to the Chief Executive of the multinational wind farm ACEN. I'll read out this message. So this came, it says, "Hi David, Nick Dugan here, hope you're well." So this is Nick Dugan, the Energy Minister, sending a text to David Pollington, the Chief Executive of Robbins Island Wind Farm, proponent ACEN. You know that?
No. Oh my god. No, keep going. This is going to be fucking great.
Okay, so Nick Dugan sends this text to David Pollington from Robbins Island Wind Farm. It says, "Hi David, Nick Dugan here. Hope you're well. Really looking forward to a positive outcome tomorrow. Robbins is such an important project for the state. We'll give you a call tomorrow when we know more. All the best, Nick." Then David Pollington from Robben Island's wind farm replies, saying, "Good evening, Nick. Thanks for the message. We are anxiously awaiting the TASCAT decision at 10 tomorrow. Would be pleased to speak tomorrow post the decision announcement. Regards, David." So, in other words, he's trying to stay very much in the loop of decisions that the government are making and how that is going to affect their bottom line in, rolling out these wind farm projects. Now, I mean, the irony of this, though, let me read the title of this news story. Text between Nick Dugan and Robben's Island wind farm proponent. Alarming look behind the curtain, Greens say. Okay, so, this is the Greens saying it's a classic example of big corporations getting in bed with government. Okay, but this is for a wind farm. Okay, this is for a project that the Greens have championed for all this time. They have very, very little right to complain about that, because this is the only way it was ever going to work, was to have enough government subsidies poured into green energy that would make it financially attractive for big companies to invest in. And what a surprise that they're then going to get in bed with government to get more decisions to go in their favour and more subsidies and more regulation to work in favour of rolling out these various green energy projects. The Greens have no right to complain that this is the kind of arrangement that is now being made between business and government.
Oh boy.
Okay.
Why act surprised? Why act surprised? Everyone knows this is fucking happening. If you went down to your local pub and said this exact fucking thing wasn't happening, they would call you the conspiracy theorist. We're not pulling Stephen Bonnell's here. We're saying corporate lobbying has no effect on government policy whatsoever.
No. Okay. Okay, moving on to abos. I don't think that word can get me banned from YouTube, does it? Maybe.
No, I don't think it's considered an actual slur yet.
Okay, so
Yet.
The federal government is saying that it will not be creating a national truth-telling commission that we often was known as the Makarrata Commission. So this was part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So remember, there were three key pillars of the Uluru Statement. Voice,
Truth, treaty. Yeah.
Do you remember the Midnight Oil T-shirt that Albert wore at that Midnight Oil concert? Voice, treaty, truth.
So we got basically political influence, undue political influence, exploitation on the nation state level, and blood libel. Yeah.
I mean, look, I would say that treaty is far and away the worst one, basically because that means the most amount of money that they would be able to squeeze out.
And legal leverage. Just straight legal leverage. We wouldn't technically own anything in this country at that point.
Yeah. So look, and the truth-telling, I'd say, is actually the most benign out of the three. And then, the voice is somewhere in the middle there.
Well, it's because white people get blood libeled every single day without government intervention.
That's what I was going to say. I was like, what is actually the point of the Truth-Telling Commission when we already have these national myths about the stolen generation or the frontier wars or the fake genocide that happened? These myths, this so-called, version of truth-telling, I'll let you in on a secret. It's not truth-telling. It's all fucking bullshit, the whole lot. So, they do have a version of this.
That's why Whitey bad.
And what they've been doing in Victoria is basically taking those existing myths, like the massacres and the stolen generations. They're the two most pervasive ones. And they're basically just adding to it. They're saying, yes, the stolen generation happened, but, did you know at this Anglicare plates, like this happened to this child, and they're just forever exaggerating it. I imagine that the Makarrata.
Did you know that they threw Aboriginal kids in the air and shot them like pigeons, clay pigeons?
Just Google, like, the Victorian Truth Telling Commission, and you can read some of these examples. Don't take our word for it.
Don't you know they marched? They did a death march of Aboriginals in Poland, and it was just to kill them.
So look, but okay. Now, to put a more positive spin on this, however, I will say that, remember, this was an election commitment from Labor. They promised that this was going to happen. They didn't quite commit fully to the treaty. And, like I said, that was, the most extreme pillar of the three. The Greens, of course, are in full support of that. And Lydia Thorpe actually opposed the voice referendum because she didn't want a voice. She wanted the treaty. It wasn't radical enough for her. So why is it that Labor have gone and actually given up on what is probably the most benign of the three pillars? And I think it's very simple. The no vote was so devastating. It was a resounding no from every state and territory except the ACT. Okay,
Which, of course, public
even
servants.
Victoria, not the vast majority, but the majority of Victorians said no to treaty.
Getting a fucking majority in Victoria for something like that is astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember what else was going on at the time. You had the Queensland LNP in favour of a state treaty. After the no vote, they opposed it. You also had Peter Dutton promising that there would be another referendum on the voice. Well, on the day after, he said, no, there is no appetite for another referendum. So the no vote was so pronounced, it was so clear, it was so devastating that this is even forcing Labor governments to give up on past commitments to Indigenous policy. And that is definitely worth celebrating, I think. And what's funny here is that Albo's actually gone like full 1984 with this, in that he's actually trying to say, no, I didn't make that promise. He said, the whole idea of Makarrata Commission was just about bringing the nation together. Seriously, he said this. He said, that's not what we've proposed. What we've proposed is Makarrata just being the idea of coming together. So it's just a fucking peace and harmony, kumbaya platitude.
Yeah, it's some bullshit. No, you see the fucking thing where it's saying there's still an appetite for the voice.
Yeah, I mean,
oh god, it's literally one of the Aboriginal elders that fucking Albanese tied himself up with for that original fucking campaign promise. And it's just oh yes, there's still an appetite for it. It's where? What? The appetite of the fucking toilet bowl?
Yeah, among Aboriginal activists and green left loonies, all of which are under 25, yeah, you might find appetite there. That's really it. That's it. So yeah,
if you're a Greens voter and you're over 25 years old, the DMT did actually damage your brain.
It did. You haven't gotten out of the K-hole yet. All right. Oh, okay. Now, funnily enough, I read the story before Labor scrapped its commitment to the Makarrata Commission. But the Greens said that the date of Australia Day may not matter and therefore may not need to be changed if there was a Federal Truth and Justice Commission established for First Nations people. Well, guess what? Labor has now abandoned that commitment. There's no way that Peter Dutton will take on that commitment. So we can only assume then that the Greens' war on Australia Day is going to continue. Now, that said, let's imagine that Labor did maintain their commitment to the Makarrata Commission. Does anyone honestly think that the Greens would lay off the Invasion Day stuff on the 26th of January? No, they wouldn't. This is, talk about cynical politics. That's basically them saying, hey, look, I know we're really a massive pain in the ass when it comes to Australia Day. Basically, if you give us this Truth Commission, we'll stop being a massive pain in the ass on Australia Day.
Oh, fuck no.
And then they'll just say, haha, just kidding. That's what they do.
Just kidding. Proceed from your knuckles up to your wrist, and when you're done with your wrist, proceed up to your elbow.
Okay. I'll start going through these stories a little quicker because we're actually only a little halfway through the prep. There's 29 pages
I
of
want
prep.
to fucking kill myself.
Okay, so I promise I'll try to go a little quicker now. So, just an interesting little tidbit coming out of the Northern Territory, and the Aboriginal crime that continues to spiral out of control over there. There's an interesting rivalry going through two clans. So one is known as the Wilson clan, and the other is known as the Bon Jovi boys. I'm not joking. Now, this is not the first time I have heard about Aboriginal clans or gangs being named after like musical artists. There was a previous one that Vice News actually reported on, and this was Aboriginal gangs named after metal bands. Let me just quickly find the article here. So there was a gang called Judas Priest Boys, a gang called Metallica, and a gang called Evil Warriors. I'm not sure how the Evil Warriors one fits in. I don't know what band that would be referencing or whatever. But yeah, they actually like kind of find these pop culture references and they name like a violent gang after it. But anyway, these two gangs, the Wilson clan and the Bon Jovi boys, have been going at it, have been slaughtering each other with improvised weapons, basically just meaning whatever it is they can grab. And now one of the Aboriginal elders from the Wilson clan, Regina Pillawok, is accusing the Northern Territory Police of ignoring their repeated reports of the Bon Jovi boys. And she's basically said that her family and her clan have been under routine attacks with the Bon Jovi boys effectively acting with immunity. Because the cops aren't doing anything about it. The cops are not cracking down on the Bon Jovi boys.
Is it a prerequisite to be an insufferable sufferable fucking big to be a part of the Bon Jovi boys?
I have no idea. This was the first time.
Bon Jovi is the world's biggest shit. Fucking Trey Parker and Matt Stone were right.
Oh, Bon Jovi's awful. Fucking terrible music. And if you want a good laugh, just have a look at John Bon Jovi's recent vocal performances. Like, it's so bad you will laugh at it. His vocals are shot. I mean, I know he's like 60-something now, but,
So are you telling me he pulled like a meet where they brought him out to sing one thing and he basically ran out of breath immediately?
Well, look, the voice is one instrument that you can't just bring down to the shop for repairs, obviously. But, if you're in that state, at least just sing an octave lower or something like that. Don't try to hit those notes that you can't hit anymore. It just won't work. Okay, so the amount of Indigenous kids in out-of-home care, guess what? It's actually at a record high. Now, the ABC profiled this woman. So she's a 31-year-old woman with a number of children in her care, her own children. And she has been advised by the New South Wales Department of Communities and Justice that she has 2 years to get her act together. Otherwise, her children will be taken from her. Now, how about
I was going to say the record amount of Aboriginal kids in custody doesn't have anything to deal with the fact that we just gave Aboriginals the ability to both abuse drugs and alcohol at rates we haven't seen since the early aughts.
Yeah, but is it just me, or is 2 years a bit too long? To test out? I mean,
two minutes and she could cave in one of their skulls. Not that I particularly care for their welfare.
I mean, obviously, this woman and her failure as a mother has attracted the attention of the department to say, hey, maybe you're not looking after your kids properly. And then they've said, you've got 2 years to get your act together. And by the way, this is to do with concerns about substance abuse, gambling, and family violence and school attendance. Okay, so it's not
Okay, if she
like
was white, she wouldn't have
these
her
are all
kids
minor
now. The kids
problems.
would be gone now. The kids would be in a
Yeah,
fucking
yes.
nunnery now.
If this was any
Probably not a
non-Aboriginal
nunnery. They're
family,
probably a rapery.
yeah. But the way the ABC presents this is like a sob story, the poor woman being picked on. And so, okay, there's a new report, the Family Matters report. It found that as of June 2002, there were 22,328 Aboriginal children in out of home care. In other words, taken from their parents. And that is the highest number on record. And that's despite the fact that, welfare agencies are very, very reluctant to take those kids in the first place. If they weren't reluctant, why would they be giving this woman 2 years to clean up her act, even though those kids quite obviously live in a state of squalor and abuse?
Well, one, it's because we hate them, and two, it's because we want to keep this like little defensive bunch of perpetually and politically shouldered shipped little fucking homunculi of the state. Because I imagine if you actually like fucking made Aboriginal communities clean and etc., they wouldn't actually really be interested in politics. They'll just be interested in what their like low agency just allows them to be interested in. But you can get little fucking feral, violent shitbags that cause issues that become talking points, and you can get one that's high enough, caste enough to come in front of a camera or come in front of a media piece and explain why it's white people's fault.
Oh yeah, no. Bush boys, as we often refer to them in WA, bush boys or bush girls, they're the full-blooded Aborigines. None of them have interest
They don't give a
in
shit
politics whatsoever. They just don't care. And you know what else? Most of them don't hate the white man. Like, they know the white man is different, but they don't hate him. They don't have any historical gripe. The vast majority of them don't anyway. It's only when you start to dilute them with white blood that they start to care. And unfortunately, the
it's
whiter
the chip
they
on the
become,
shoulder. I've said this 100 times.
Yeah.
I've said
the
fucking
more-
times. It's
the political
having enough
Aborigine.
neurons to rub together. Yeah, it's having enough neurons. The political Aboriginal is doing it because like they're not really fucking Aboriginal. They know that there's like there's a drop in their barrel of wine that allows them to use leverage political power supplied to them by a certain friendly small-hatted people. But the ones that are like quarter caste and half caste and etc., they got enough neurons to rub together to look at a white person and realize that they are a fucked up inferior version of that there's something very, very fucking wrong with them. And in that kind of psychology in human beings only results in one thing, which is violence against what hurts you mentally.
Yeah, because I remember one disagreement I had with David Hiscox back when we did XYZ Live was he said that Aborigines had the mentality of a defeated people. And I said to him, only a very specific group of Aborigines have that mentality. And that's, what you were just describing there. Basically the ones that are, mainly white, they're only a quadroon or an octoroon Aboriginal, and they're political. They're the ones who, take on that chip on the shoulder, inferiority complex, or whatever. But your full-blooded Aborigine does not have the mentality of a defeated race. They don't even really have a concept really of national or racial pride. They know that they're different and that they're a distinct racial group, and they just want to hang out with their own people. But it doesn't really go any further than that, I don't think.
If I would rather be in a town with full-blooded Aboriginals than half castes or quarter caste.
So would I.
Basically, with them, it's just like, okay. Even if they were apprehensive about you, it's just like, oh shit, man, here's a case of fucking beer. Just leave me the fuck alone. And they'll do it. They'll literally go off into a corner and do that, and you'll be fucking damn dandy for the rest of the day. Give them just have a packet of cigarettes on you or some shit like that, something real simple like that. With quarter caste, they'll take the thing and then they'll fucking kill you too.
Yep. Okay, so the last story on A News is, actually, you showed me this one, Haley Terry is a 32-year-old woman who was released from custody in May, facing charges. I don't know why I said that. In May. So she was on charges of burglary, theft, and other charges in Victoria. And she was released on bail partly because of her professed Aboriginality. So she claimed that she inherited her Aboriginality from her maternal line, but her mother had passed away.
So she's religiously Aboriginal.
Yeah. So when she was 3 years old, her mother passed away. So obviously, they couldn't go to her mother for comment. Okay. So the justice found that her Aboriginality was one factor that made her more vulnerable and at a higher risk of harm in custody. So when she was on bail, the woman failed
that this is exactly the exact fucking opposite. Sorry, I love that we've actually covered that they are at a lower risk of harm in police custody than they are back at their own fucking home.
Yeah, no, you're more likely to live in jail as an Aboriginal person than outside of jail, but that's a different story. Anyway, okay, so this woman failed to engage with Corrections Victoria, so report to police, or reside at her mandated address. But here's the kicker. She lied to the court about her Aboriginal background, and now that she's back in jail, having her bail revoked, she is also now likely to be charged with perverting the course of justice. So a police informant had listened back to recorded phone calls that she had made, and it actually revealed that she was talking to her mum, who is alive and well in New Zealand. She is not Aboriginal, and no, she did not die when she was 3 years old. So there you go. One of the many examples of where Aborigines do have privilege. They are a protected victim group in Australia. And if you can prove that you're a member of that protected group, you will gain some of those privileges for yourself, as this woman did.
Unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, that is the world that we live in.
Okay. Look, I'll just comment on these next two stories kind of quickly. This story pisses me off, but it's about the inquiry that's going on at the moment into the death of Cleveland Dodd. He was the one who committed suicide, or supposedly committed suicide in Unit 18, which was where they have juvenile prisoners incarcerated in an adult prison, that is Casuarina Prison, which is our maximum security prison. So the boss of the WA Department of Justice broke down on the stand, and he felt that he had been overseeing a department that was administering institutional abuse of children. He said, "I think I was personally defensive because it goes to my ethics, my whole career." And then he goes on to say that, he only had things to confess in the end. He apologized to Cleveland Dodd's mother, who was in the court at the time, saying that he should have reached out to her and spoken with her about the matter, and basically says that the Department of Justice failed her and her family. This is exactly the type of grandstanding that they want, because, when it comes to specifics, how exactly did the Department of Justice fail here? How were they responsible for the death of this teenager? They don't really go into that in any regard.
I wonder why.
Okay, Queensland is becoming the final state to decriminalise public drunkenness. So this was actually first recommended 30
When?
years ago. And this was from the Royal Commission into Aboriginal Deaths in Custody. We were just referencing. That was that was the report that actually found that Aborigines are less likely to die in jail than they are in the
Christ
Go to
almighty.
Quadrant. That's good coverage of that. If you want to go read it, go to Quadrant. They've got stuff on that. Now, look, it's interesting that they have tied that issue to Aboriginality, because, you know, as far as I know, like in Ireland, for example, public drunkenness is illegal, but it's never enforced. The reason why public drunkenness is a crime is basically so when police realize that there's a volatile situation happening with alcohol, you know, people who are drunk and maybe shouting and swearing at each other, that gives them the power to make some arrests or at least move people on. That's the basics of it. It's not because they want to, you know, get someone just for like, you know, walking drunk from a pub into a taxi or something. They're not interested in doing that. It's just so that they have something at their disposal to calm down a volatile situation. Now, that should definitely be a tool in the toolbox for police when it comes to drunk Aborigines, surely. But this basically would mean that they would have to wait for the first punches to be thrown for them to actually do anything about it. So, yeah, it's like, okay, I don't want to see a whole bunch of people being arrested just because they're pissed in public, okay? But, you know...
They can be a danger to themselves. And someone who has been mega shit-hammered in public before.
Of course. And yeah, so I mean, I would prefer if police did have that at their disposal. And now, Australia-wide, they won't. This was the last jurisdiction to repeal those laws. Okay,
Oh, well.
Now in the Northern Territory, there's this guy called Steve Doherty, and he is the campaign manager for the Country Liberal Party candidate Helen Secretary. Yes, her name is Secretary. She's an Aboriginal woman, and you know it's actually not uncommon for the Aboriginal women to run for the Country Liberal Party. We all know Jacinta Price. You might have also heard of her mum, Bess Price. She ran for the CLP.
Best Price shoes.
As well. So anyway, this guy, it's turned out that he made comments about domestic violence essentially being the fault of the victim. Or at least that's the way the story is being spun. He's saying that they need, well, here's the direct quote. He said they should take some personal responsibility for their own lives. And he basically said, well, look, if you're in a violent relationship, why don't you get up and leave and take the kids with you if you've got kids? Now, what is interesting here, though, I mentioned that he's the campaign manager for Helen Secretary. In 1996, Helen Secretary shot her husband in the head with a pistol while he was sleeping. She was found not guilty on the grounds of self-defense because she was being mentally and physically abused by her husband. So she was able to get a pistol and kill him in his sleep, much like that guy who did the Simpsons voices, and she actually got away with it.
Wait, what the fuck?
Who was the guy? You know the guy who did the voice of Troy McClure and Lionel
You may know
Hutz?
me from a fucking bullet in my head.
That guy. His wife shot him in the head while he was sleeping when she was
I've heard his
cocaine.
voice. I know why.
Hey, man, Lionel Hutz was one of the funniest, like, minor characters they had on The Simpsons, I thought. I thought that was a great character. Yeah, and then his bloody cokehead wife shot him in the head. Anyway, I read the story because that is just so ironic. Here he is actually like running the campaign of this country Liberal Party candidate, who literally shot her husband in the head because he was violent. Oh, they're Aboriginal. I think I did mention that. This was classic like Aboriginal Northern Territory domestic violence. She shot him in the fucking head. And now this guy is like...
Sometimes there's people who commit domestic violence of the Northern Territory and they move to other parts of Australia.
Or maybe by his definition, this was her taking responsibility. You can take responsibility by killing the cunt.
Hey, Finian, do you know that it's a Jewish plot to remove the right of a married couple to punch each other in the face?
Of course I do.
Right? No. Anyway, on other things, without me making fucking coy references to something. Again, like, is it normally like fucking Aboriginal domestic violence, like just like getting glassed in your sleep or some shit? Like, this is definitely a step above. There's a level of agency. She's shown that she's a cut above the rest by blowing that bunger's head smooth off.
She's good enough to run for candidate as a candidate for the CLP, and get a white man, get a Wodjella to be her campaign manager. And she was high agency enough to actually get off on self-defense after shooting her husband in the head
while he was asleep.
Yeah, she's got to be. She's got to be well above the average.
You know what?
Because I think she's a full blood as well. Like, I had a look at a picture of her. She looks full blood.
Being that was a strictly self-defense situation. She's not proud of what she did, but she's proud that she defended herself. And he fucked her up. She fucked him up so much, even the police knew how much she hated him.
Oh God, this is quite ghoulish that we're laughing at this.
I know it's bad, but we live in a shit world, Finny, and you have to enjoy yourself sometimes.
Yeah, you got to surf the Kali-Yuga. Okay, right. So, by the way, the Northern Territory election only 3 weeks away. So we'll endeavour to give you a bit of coverage on that. And both parties have now committed to $180 million worth of funding for domestic violence, I guess, to stop future husbands from being shot in the head while they sleep. Look, this happens every single election cycle. They promise more money because even by global standards, domestic violence is out of control in the Northern Territory. Take a guess as to why?
I don't know.
Okay. Last story on... by the way, I didn't even mention, we've moved from Aboriginal crime onto... Aboriginal stories onto crime. And you'll notice that we're still talking about Aborigines the whole time. I don't even need to write that heading in there, I don't think. Anyway, last story on crime. So there's been a Victorian police trial that basically implements two things. One is that it focuses on non-punitive measures. In other words, instead of handing out fines and arresting people, they hand out cautions and move-on orders. The other aspect of this is that police patrolling around Melbourne do so with a support worker side by side. So they've got that person.
Yeah, I remember coming up and taking photos of them obnoxiously on purpose.
We did cover this program like a few weeks ago, I remember. So yeah, like the social worker is designed to be that intermediary who can come up and, maybe mediate the situation and calm things down. Here in WA, we have the Noongar Patrol, or Noongar Outreach, I believe they're called now. And that's basically what they are. They're like... they're
the drunk Aboriginal cleanup squad.
Yeah. and because they're they're all like bloody quadroon, they're not very Aboriginal, but nonetheless, the drunk Aborigines on like the streets of Northbridge and Fremantle show them more respect than they do with a white copper. But anyway, this program was rolled out in 2020, and well, here's two interesting facts for you. Ever since this program was rolled out. The first one is that Victoria is currently undergoing a youth crime wave. So the crimes that have been committed from people aged 14 to 17. So data that was released in March showed that this age group accounted for 18,729 crimes in 2023, and that is an increase of 30%. There's your first factoid. Now, your second factoid, which is even more telling, I think. The Victorian Labor government has refused or has delayed the release of the program's findings. So, as I said, this program was rolled out in 2020, and we were due to actually get data up until June 2023. Well, here we are in August 2024, and the data has still not been released. The government is simply saying it's delayed because, I don't know, they're crunching the numbers or collating it or whatever it is. But the opposition is on their back saying, hey, we want to see those numbers now. And should we take bets here? I mean, come on, it's obvious what's going on. This program has been a failure. It's been running in tandem with a surge in youth crime and just crime generally in Melbourne, and they're too embarrassed by the figures, and so they won't release them.
Imagine if they did fucking release them. Imagine the amount of egg on face there would be. Actually, probably not egg on face. Probably like, cudgel on face at that point, really. But,
Well, look, they're saying that they will. They will release it eventually. Let's see. Hopefully, the piss-weak opposition in Victoria actually holds them to it.
If it's released, there'll be so many fucking asterisks. I'm having a fucking stroke here.
Asterisks. It's hard to say that as a plural, isn't it?
Asterisks. There we go. Asterisks. On the footnotes of the page, being like, "Oh, this data has been modified in this way. This data has been modified in this way. This data has been modified in this way." So yeah, it's one of these things that just modern society cannot admit.
Yep. All right. So moving on to drugs, I think we covered last time that Victoria is set to roll out pill testing for the music festivals that will arrive in summertime. Queensland has now announced the same thing, and they said that it's going to be rolled out for schoolies. So when you graduate from year 12, or in WA we call it leavers. So there we go. More 17-year-olds will be able to determine the purity and the quality of the drugs that they purchase for free, funded by the government, and they will be better informed consumers of those drugs, because that's essentially what the service that pill testing offers you. How good are your eckies? Okay, now, often in this section we talk about vapes and illegal vapes. Sometimes we talk about illegal tobacco, illegal cigarettes. Today, I did not even know about this, but health authorities are involved in a crackdown on illegal energy drinks. So
yes, there was one that actually got temporary release in this country that had a fucking horrendous, will give you the shakes levels of caffeine.
Yeah, so what these have, what makes them illegal is that they have excessive amounts of caffeine or, one of those other ingredients like taurine, guarana, whatever. And apparently there is a black market for this stuff. Like the Red Bull and the Monster Energy drink is not enough for some people. And they need these really dangerous levels of caffeine and other chemicals in their energy drinks. Wow. You just have a second one, couldn't you? Just have two?
Oh no, some dude. I was actually talking to my coworker about this like a bit ago. He brought the thing up, and it was like so like your standard like I think probably the best off the shelf thing you can get for caffeine is like those iced coffees. Oddly enough, it's not energy drinks, and they come at like fucking 80 milligrams per like 100 or some shit like that. These drinks were coming at 20.
Sorry, say that again. You kind of cut out.
Oh, these drinks were coming in at 220 milligrams per 100 mils.
A shit ton, in other words.
Oh yeah, like a genuinely horrendous amount. We're talking, like that Beastie Boy song, 50 cups of coffee and you know it's on. I rock the rock that is the break of dawn.
Yeah.
50 cups of coffee is basically something that's undrinkable, right? You could actually probably clear about 50 cups of coffee, like fucking smashing these things. These will kill people.
Yeah. I mean, you can die from a caffeine overdose, I guess.
Yes.
Okay. Now, in New South Wales, Chris Minns, the Labor Premier, has ruled out decriminalising cannabis. Now, there were a lot of rumours that he was going to decriminalise it for, two main reasons. One was because he has committed to a new drug summit. This would be the second drug summit that New South Wales has ever had. The other reason was because he was said to be having meetings with a lot of people, including from the religious community. This is what surprised me a little bit. But a lot of lobbies that were basically saying, look, you're locking up too many people just, guilty of drug possession. And you need to take more of you need to look at this more as a public health issue rather than a criminal issue. But no, he's ruled it out. And that was an election promise. Labor did promise not to decriminalise cannabis. So I guess, okay, we've got at least like a stall. They're slowing it down. I don't have any doubt, though, that they're still marching towards, legalisation in New South Wales and across the country. All right, now also in New South Wales, they're going to be holding an inquiry onto the impacts of porn, especially on young people. So this is a parliamentary committee that will look into and report on the impacts of violent and misogynistic pornographic material and its effect on mental, emotional, and physical health. Okay, now I don't like the way they have to frame that. They're basically just saying that this is exclusively about the exploitation of women. It is.
It's porn. It goes both ways. There's so much fucking fucked up shit in that barrel of fish.
Right. The entire industry is fucked up. I've recommended it before, but watch Sex, the Annabelle Chong story, which is a documentary on this woman called Annabelle Chong. She set the world record for having the most amount of sex with, I can't remember, hundreds of men in like a few hours. And you can really get an inside look into just how fucked up that world is. But yeah, okay, sure, it's exploitative of women. There's no doubt about that. Now, we have to... this was based on a report last year from the EU Safety Commissioner. So it found that 75% of 16 to 18-year-olds had seen online porn. I'm surprised those numbers weren't higher. And it said nearly 1/3 of the group had seen online porn before the age of 13.
Yes.
Well, man,
it's really good for young children.
Well, man, even I had seen that before I was 13. I'm surprised those numbers aren't much higher. I am. 1/3? That sounds.
Yeah, I was going to say like I did. I know you're asking teenagers, and people would be minorly proud of it, but are you sure that they actually would be proud of that shit?
They might be worried that their mum can see them filling in the form, and they just lie about it.
Mm.
Um,
Fucking, I remember I was, I think I was in what's year 6 in terms of age? So year 1 is 5, so year 6 is 9? Yeah, 9 years old. 9 years old. So I was 9 years old, and I remember some kid just straight up brought like fucking like girls just like fucking finger blasting themselves on their school laptop because I'm a cunty rich boy apparently.
yeah, like I was my first exposure to it was not good. Like I did sort of grow up while internet porn was becoming a thing. Like still like when I was like say 12 for example, most people I knew still didn't have the internet. But I remember I went to this like sleepover party as you do when you're in primary school. And we had this friend who had an older cousin. And that older cousin was able to get you things, that you wanted. And so he turned up with a VHS tape of really horrific porn. It was hentai. So the first time I ever saw porn was hentai. And that was not good.
And you've been the world's most monotone, serious Irishman ever since.
Well, look, man, like...
On that day, you lost your innocence. On that day, the grey mask of seriousness fell upon your face.
If it had lasting impacts on me, because I was
probably fucking did, man.
It probably did. And so I mean,
we're gonna have to give you surgery to get the stick out of your ass.
Fuck off. But
oh, don't worry, have to do surgery to get the dick out of mine.
Still at that very young age, where internet porn was not readily available at that point, I was still exposed to it. So these numbers that they've come out here from the Age Safety Commission, they just seem so low. Like the amount of porn, the amount of 16 to 18-year-olds exposed to online porn, man, that would have to be like 90-something%. And then the amount of 13-year-olds, like I'd say it'd have to be well over half. Those numbers just seem so low. But also, look, while, certainly in principle I had nothing against an inquiry into all of this, do we need one? I mean, there's already a lot of research on this, and you can go to, yourbrainonporn.com. You can read about this stuff. Like, there is no debate on this. It is damaging. Like, to both male, female, all ages, whatever type of porn you're watching, it's damaging. Like,
by the way, remember that the
government money on it to find out what we already know.
Remember, when there's a porn ban suggested, or getting age verification to look at pornography, which by the way is the law, but actually checking ID or some shit like that. Which two groups scream out about loud? One calls it genocide. Actually, they both call it genocide. One calls it genocide in a much more indirect way. One just straight up calls it genocide. Which two groups am I talking about here?
Tell us.
Gays and trannies.
Okay.
Yeah, they say that like without early access to pornography, they wouldn't have known they were gay, and then also in the other camp, without early access to pornography, they wouldn't have known they were trans. And it's like, okay, so you're saying that watching disturbing material when you're a child made you this way. It's a weird thing to say, isn't it?
When you sexualize a person before they hit puberty, you warp them, you traumatize them. And this is, why when you have, children who are molested at a young age, they're more likely to become gay. And the studies are actually quite universal on that. Not any modern studies. You can't get modern studies anymore. But
no, you can't.
90s, actually, the early aughts, you can read those studies.
Yeah, no, actually, oddly enough, Finian, you want to get studies on gays and mental disorders, you just go to GLAAD, read the studies that they do, and just read between the lines. I'll do a parallel data analysis. It literally, GLAD comes up saying that gays are mentally ill.
Yeah, and if
Now,
you don't
GLAD
want to
said
read
they-
between the lines, just go to the Family Research Institute.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, that thing has been tarred and feathered. I'd actually like to use GLAD data, just because it's just like it's like, you think GLAD is your ally? Well, unfortunately, without the editorialization of your raw data, it shows that you're a whole bunch of traumatized little kids.
It does, unfortunately.
Yeah, if you get rid of the abstract and the conclusion from any GLAD funded research paper, it basically shows that, like, yeah, like, holy fucking shit, you were touched as kids, you're fucked in the head, you have dissociative disorder, and yeah, you're just broken fucking people on one way or another. It may not even be molestation; it may just be general social isolation.
Yeah, so
That's the next one.
this inquiry that's going ahead in the Northern Territory, I mean, I hope very much that they do look at studies like that, or look at the Family Research Institute. I'd much rather that they go to them. And yeah, as you said, they've been tarred and feathered, so yeah, chances are they probably won't. But yeah, I just have to say, look, man, the research is already there. Why do we need to piss up more taxpayer money on stuff like this? I don't know. We know what we know. Okay, let's move on. Okay, going to state politics. So yeah, I think I mentioned this at the beginning. The Teals they do actually have an active campaign in the Northern Territory for the election that is on the 24th, so only 3 weeks away. And believe it or not, you still have elements of gentrification and an increase in high density housing in Darwin. And some of those seats are being targeted by independent candidates that are, well, Teals. You look at their campaign material, they all use the teal colouring, and they're being funded by Climate 200 and Simon Holmes a Court. So, yeah, there's a number of seats in play, even though the Northern Territory lower house has like 30 seats, or 20 something seats, I think, like very, very few. Anyway, we'll keep you updated on that. In New South Wales, Gladys Berejiklian has actually lost her bid to overturn the findings in the ICAC report against her. Now, the ICAC report did not make any recommendations for charges to be laid. It did not refer her to New South Wales Police. Nonetheless, it did find that she engaged in, quote, serious corrupt conduct. And so even though, she wasn't fined or anything, she kind of saw this as defamatory, and she wanted to clean up her public reputation. So she took this to the New South Wales Court of Appeal, and, well, it spectacularly backfired on her. Now, in this court, there are 3 judges. So it's worth pointing out that this was a split decision. It was 2-1. So, you could perhaps argue that this was a line ball call. It was borderline. But yeah, it did find that her relationship with Darryl Maguire, remember, this was the corrupt ex-Liberal MP who was involved in a lot of pork barreling, but most significantly, he was running an illegal visa scheme where he was importing Chinese migrants illegally because of his connections to immigration in federal parliament. The court agreed with ICAC's finding that this relationship was not only inappropriate, but it was a serious failure of judgment for her to not have publicly disclosed it. Remember, that relationship was kept secret the whole time. And doing
Imagine
that,
if it was applied universally.
They made the point that, like, okay, while other romantic relationships, you don't obviously have to declare all of them, this is one where the professional nature involved here, that is, both being members of the New South Wales Parliament, made it a disclosable issue. It should have been made public. And yeah, I think I agree. Okay. Quickly in Queensland, the long-serving MP Julian Gilbert has announced she's retiring at the next election. This is one of those ones where Stephen Miles was really hoping she would hang around because she's a Labor Party stalwart. She's popular, and Labor are, riding a sinking ship at the moment. They needed kind of all the best people they could get. Okay, now the Federal Nationals. Here in WA, Mia Davies was the leader of the National Party, and she was also leader of the opposition because the Nationals walked away with more seats than the Liberals did in our last state election. She announced her retirement from state politics 18 months ago, but you may not be surprised that she is now announcing that she's running for federal politics. As very often happens with high-ranking members of major parties at the state level, they announce that they're retiring from politics, and then, guess what? Actually, they were just recalibrating for a federal tilt. In other words, they're going for higher offers. They're going for a more lucrative position with better pay and better status. So, no surprise she's doing that. Okay, so there have been calls for Barnaby Joyce to resign again. I think last time, when he got pissed and fell off that seat, people were calling on him to resign. Instead,
he thought it was on the phone.
Yeah, to his missus.
He was like, no, it wasn't to his missus because he was like cussing. He was like, fuck. I remember him sending out a tweet saying, like, if this paralytic alcoholic is a politician in this country, then maybe I've got a chance in politics.
Yeah, and by the way, he was on the street of what is like the busiest precinct in Canberra. So, like, obviously pretty fucking stupid to do that because there's lots of people walking around. But anyway, he urged people, protesters at a wind farm protest, to use their ballot papers as bullets to say goodbye to the Prime Minister. That was just his colourful way of saying vote for the Nationals and not for Labor. Now,
phrasing.
The reason why this is particularly controversial.
Because of recent events.
He said it like 2 days after Donald Trump got grazed in the ear with a bullet. And it was just, too soon, bro. The timing was all wrong. So, yeah.
I love how weird we can be as social animals.
Yeah, but, does someone deserve to resign over something like that? Come on. I don't give a shit. Okay, and just quickly, Jackie Lambie has revealed the makeup of the board of her party. So remember, she does have her own party called the Jackie Lambie Network. It's always very hard to kind of pin down ideologically exactly where they stand. But recently you had her senator, Tammy Tyrrell, in the federal parliament. She resigned. She went independent. She said she did not like the way things were being handled in terms of the internal machinations of the party. And yeah, it turns out here that she was basically self-appointed president of the board of her party. So it looks like the criticism is Jackie Lambie is setting this up much in the same way that Pauline Hanson has designed One Nation. This is Jackie Lambie Network. It's not the network or whatever. Her name's in the title, and she's going to retain control. And yeah, dare I say, if you're a minor party, you have to kind of keep it that way. You don't have the same amount of organization and funding that a major party has with all their spin doctors and everything. So the only way to kind of run a tight ship, the tight operation, is if you, really exert a lot of control over it.
Okay.
I'm going to fire through the remainder of the story.
What is Lambie? Has anyone figured out exactly what she is? Where is Lambie on the fucking political quadrant? Because she's like a fucking chess piece at this point. She's like a knight jumping around the entire fucking political quadrant like a fucking chessboard.
Well, this is what happens when you start your career in politics as a member of Palmer United. Okay, because that's actually how she got into the Senate.
Yes.
She was a pup, Palmer United Party. And like all of them pretty much, she left after not very long.
Please don't call them pups. That Jesus fucking Christ.
I still remember that term from back then. Okay.
God, that was a fucking ages ago now, wasn't it? Jeez, I still remember meeting Fraser Anning in that one fucking weird tiny church out in Swan Valley.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I handed out how to vote cards. I really regret it now. Okay, so territories representation. So you might know that in the federal Senate, I believe that each state has, is it 12 senators? I hope I'm getting that right.
I think it is.
The territories only have 2.
Yes.
The territories only have 2 senators. So Labor actually had a promise to double their representation, to take it from 2 seats to 4 seats. Well, guess what? That measure has been shelved. We don't know if they have lost it entirely, but certainly in the lead up to the next election, that's not something that Labor is going to be talking about. Okay, something, I guess, good to come out of the East Safety Commission. The tech giants, so that includes Meta, Google, Apple, Microsoft, they're going to be forced to report on their efforts to tackle online child sex abuse material on their platforms every 6 months. Good. So that is after a new direction from the head of eSafety, that delightful cat lady. I forget her name.
Okay. Like a fucking stuck cock is right twice a day.
Julian Mangrant. The same woman, going after Elon Musk. So, yeah, I think that's a much better use of her resources and power as to, trying so desperately to get that knifing video off of Twitter. Okay. In New South Wales, they're rolling out a new school curriculum. They said that there's a focus on explicit teaching. Now, what that means is knowledge teaching as opposed to skill-based teaching. Look, I think you need both, and I think the further you progress throughout high school, the more skills-based teaching should at least be offered to you. If you're not so good with numbers and words or whatever, maybe you're more suited to a trade, and, you should be able to take on woodwork and metalwork classes because that'll serve you better in the trade that you want to go on to when you start an apprenticeship after high school, for example. So I don't know if that's such a good idea. Human society and the environment. That's going to be a new subject, and that's after the merger of history and geography. Now, that course will also include compulsory civics and citizenship content that is going to cover democratic roles and the history of voting in a democracy. So you can imagine how paused that is going to be. Australian history is going to include Aboriginal cultures as well as the First Fleet and what led to the country's federation. You can imagine that's going to be very, very paused as well.
Yep.
So students for the first time will also learn about the healthy use of digital services. That includes balancing screen time with outdoor physical activity. Okay, that would be about the only thing there that I support. But make sure you put a bit of it into action as well. Make sure you force them, like mobile phones should be banned from schools and tablets should only be used for educational purposes.
I remember that one comparison image. It's like world's fattest man 19. It was like it's like world's fattest man 1910. And 1910 was like stock market rise. Fucking like quite literally, you could be a really fat bastard if you wanted in 1910. And it's like police officer. Was it 2024? And it's just like the dude's actually bigger than the world's fattest man.
Yeah, well, police officers don't have to resit their fitness test. They should.
Oh yeah, they should.
Okay.
I mean, to be fair, that one fucking state security officer that fucking head checked me into a brick wall. Jesus Christ, he was fit. His partner got outrun by the other guy though. I wish his partner would run after me because I would have got away.
Oh, God.
Oh man.
The stories that white nationalists have to tell with the authorities. Last educational story. Queensland school drivers are not receiving the industry-wide pay rise for bus drivers. So the state government announced that state bus drivers would be paid $35 an hour, but this excludes those bus drivers for schools. That's shit. They should get it too. Okay, on to defense. We're finally going to repair our Collins-class submarines. We're dedicating $2.2 billion towards that.
Why?
Because half of them are actually out of action because they need repairing. And they've just been sitting there doing nothing. Now, if you're asking why as to what are we doing with those submarines, well, yeah, I don't know. They're just swimming around. Okay, so Defence's decision to build a storage facility for low-level radioactive waste at HMAS Stirling Naval Base has been questioned by the operator of Australia's only radioactive waste repository and former Defence Minister. So yeah, we've only got one place to store all of this stuff. And this was like, in like the ABC's campaign against nuclear power, they kept making a song and dance about this. Because the waste that's made from the AUKUS submarines, or will be, remember they're not online yet, and also the waste that we have from that facility in New South Wales, there's only one repository in all of Australia that we have dedicated to radioactive waste. And so, of course, the question is, where are we going to put all of that other waste? So they're actually just having a song and dance here about building one more. For God's sake, why can't we just put this waste in Central Australia, where no one lives, literally no one?
No one can live.
That was Bob Hawke's idea. Bob Hawke said that. He said, we are the best equipped country in the world for safe nuclear waste storage, yet we don't do it. Okay, on to disability. We're edging closer and closer to Bill Shorten's reforms of the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme. This is worrying state premiers, and you know what it is because they have penned a collective letter. So this was Labor premiers and chief ministers to the federal government, basically saying, the plan that you've got to push people from the NDIS onto state services is going to cost us a fuck ton of money. Now, I'm sure that's true. But I would just basically say that, all right, what you need to do is you need to scrap so many of these programs. It was reported, this is going to happen, you're not able to get a prostitute anymore. We probably covered that last episode.
Damn it! God damn it!
But remember, there's other things like crystal therapy, aromatherapy, and even cuddle therapy that you can access.
Where you can ask for a happy ending.
Right. So, okay, I get it. Like, it would be a bad idea to simply, move the cost burden from federal to state. You're just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic when you're doing it that way. Okay, that's fine. Abolish those programs entirely then. There are some items on the NDIS you should not ever be able to access, like cuddle therapy, for God's sake. Now, one of the recent reforms was a decision to put a cap on price increases, and that cap was 3.19%. So this was for items provided through the NDIS. Now, nearly 3/4 of care providers for the disabled are considering closing down as a result of that. So there you go. This is an example of where you're implementing price controls, and a lot of the time, when you implement price controls, whoever it is that's selling that product or that service can't make a profit anymore. Remember when Venezuela ran out of condoms? The reason why, it wasn't because there was like a shortage of latex or something. It was because they put a price control on the price of condoms, and that made it unprofitable. So people just stopped selling them. Same with toilet paper as well, I think. So, this is an example of that happening. You're actually...
to be fair, a lot of these market problems can be solved by using a very specialized kind of contractor to go there and incentivize retailers to actually comply with certain regulations.
That could be it. But yeah.
By the way, in Venezuela, they actually fucking opened up a whole bunch of fucking warehouses and found specialized goods and medicine. Which, yeah, it shows how fucking deep they were in concerns of the people.
Yeah. So, I mean, those companies are obviously just hoarding it because they weren't
the companies importing to Venezuela, yeah, they were fucking, yeah. And the government officials were colluding with them because, third world fucking corruption.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Last story on disability. Right. So the government announced a response to the Royal Commission into Disability. The Greens are very unhappy with that response. There were 173 recommendations that were made. Labor has committed to only a handful of them. Some of the biggest recommendations were things like an end to workplace segregation. In other words, when you have disabled people who work in the workplace and sometimes, they're segregated from other staff or whatever. Sometimes that's for a very good reason. Okay, they need their own space. So it was ones like that Labor are not committing to. Yeah, and look, as to the commitments that are actually making, we really have to wait till Bill Shorten announces those further reforms to the NDIS to know what they are. Okay, now, Brittany Higgins, the defamation suit.
She's back.
Yeah, so this is actually going on now. So Linda Reynolds, the former Liberal senator, she launched defamation action against Brittany Higgins and her, now husband, David Shiraz. They got married recently in France. So this was to do with a series of tweets that both of them made. And this is where they accused Linda Reynolds of not providing Brittany Higgins with the support she needed when she was allegedly raped, and also trying to cover it up. Now, there were several attempts at mediation. They all failed. Linda Reynolds also won access to one of Brittany Higgins's trust funds. So this was $2.4 million of money that was given to her by the Commonwealth as compensation for 2 government departments failing her, partly because of the alleged rape, but also because of workplace bullying and harassment that she apparently underwent as well. Linda Reynolds won the right to access that money if she is to be awarded damages. Brittany Higgins, of course, wanted to close off that option. So, she could effectively say, well, look, I don't have any money that you're allowed to touch, so I can't pay you any damages. So it's not a surprise to me that all of those talks failed, because Linda Reynolds knows she can get money out of this. That's what she wants, and I think she should have it. Anything to punish these 2 pricks. So the court This is in the WA Supreme Court. You're in Perth. And that kicked off on Friday, I believe. Both the ABC and the Australian are doing a rolling coverage of that, if you want to check it out. But yeah, Lynn Reynolds is basically sticking to her story that she has been painted as a villain by Brittany Higgins and David Shiraz. That was the head of a story of rape and a fictional cover-up. And she said that she suffered emotional, professional, and even physical harm as a result of it, because she was admitted to a hospital with a heart arrhythmia. So yeah, I can't wait till she wins this. She will win it.
Do our balls need to be punished that much?
So believe it or not, support for the Republic has gone up in Australia.
Now, yes, in eras of like fucking geopolitical turmoil that aren't necessarily involved with like our local Oceania partners, yes, it does go up. Unfortunately, faggotry also goes up.
So from the last news poll, they found that 40% of people supported a republic. Oh, sorry, this news poll, this is a way, way back one. This is 2014. Oh, so again, I'm actually referring to the Needs of a Nation survey. This is the one that the Australian commissioned. So 40% of people supported a republic in 2014. That's gone up to 44% for the recent 2024 survey. Now, they're putting that down to two things. One is the death of the Queen. So, of course, now you've got Prince Charles instead, who is not as popular and never will be as popular, but also because of the royal scandals, particularly the Jeffrey Epstein guy. I'm sorry, what's his name? Prince something. Is it Prince Andrew? Yes, Prince Andrew.
The pedophile one. Yes, Prince Andrew.
Yeah. And I guess also because people don't like Harry and his bitch wife.
Sorry. Well, they're estranged now. They're estranged and commercial and American and mixed race.
I didn't know they were estranged.
Yeah, no, they estranged themselves. He wrote that book like
you mean estranged from the royal family?
The royals, yes.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, now, however, the Republic movement still doesn't have a chance. Why is that? Well, because of the voice referendum. They pissed up almost $500 million on a proposition that was bound to fail. And now Labor is saying, well, there's no appetite for another referendum. Well, no shit. No one's going to be willing for another one to cost a similar amount of money so soon after we just had one. So ironically, most of the people and most of the activists who were supporting an Aboriginal voice were also big supporters of the Republic. They thought they could go one better with the voice. Well, they shot themselves in the foot with that, because not only did they lose the voice, but they've lost any appetite for another referendum on the Republic. You'd have to wait at least probably another 10 years, I'd say, for there to be any chance. So that just completely backfired on them. Okay, last story. Nolsey, are you a member of an active club?
No, I'm becoming a skinny little twink, so I'm a member of a HIV active club. But extremism! God damn, that sounds like a whole bunch of extremism, doesn't it?
So look,
that sounds like things that should be ranted about from ASIO all the way down to the lowly Dr. Katz Ross.
There is a Senate inquiry. And by the way, you know who's responsible for that Senate inquiry into right-wing extremism? Peter Dutton.
Echo.
Oh. No, Peter? Oh, well, of course there's echoey elements. But I mean, if you're talking about direct responsibility, who was the minister who actually set this up? It was Peter Dutton, back when he was Home Affairs Minister. And he did it at the behest of Christina Keneally at the time. And part of the reason for that was because Australia hosted a CPAC conference. I kid you not.
Jesus
CPAC,
Christ.
right? So that's why. And so this inquiry has been going on. It must be at least 3 years now. It just seems like it never fucking ends. But anyway, one of the most recent submissions to this inquiry is the rapid growth of active clubs. Now, an active club is said to basically be a neo-Nazi extremist organization that has attempted to fly under the radar and simply present itself as a place for sport and training.
No, and trust me, dude, the guys in those things are so fucking autistic that like you'll know exactly what it's about within the first fucking 5 minutes of being there. Hey, not to talk shit on the guys, the good guys, the fit guys, fucking ripped guys you'd like to actually help you move house. And by the way, I'm moving house in a hot minute. Ring me. And yeah, like, what's the fucking problem? It's a bunch of dudes working out. Yeah, they've got fucking nasty opinions. Those opinions aren't technically illegal right now, and you don't like them working out. Okay, why is that? Explain the pathology of that to me.
Yeah, so the other thing is, though, that the way this article is worded, it's as if, like, say, the EAM is being replaced by an active club. Well, that's not true. All of these groups,
not even close,
like the NSN and the EAM, they're still around. They still exist, and they make no secret as to what they're about. These active clubs are, like, as far as I can see, are simply just something on top of that. Yes, a lot of the people in the active clubs adhere to that so-called extremist ideology, but that is actually what the club is meant to be about. As in, it's meant to be about sports and training. Okay, if you want more of a political outlet, then, well, you go and you join the NSN or the EAM, and they are making no secrets about recruiting people and having a political agenda. The idea that they're trying to hide something through the active club is just ridiculous.
At this point, we don't fucking we used to hide. We used to fucking roll in the shadows. We don't anymore. And that's mostly because not because that we're like, oh god, we feel so strong in our position, blah blah blah. We've got so many resources now in our position. No, it's because you're so weak.
Yep.
That's it.
That is it. Okay. Yeah, and if you want to join an active club, fucking go and join one. Like, if that's something that you think would benefit you and your fitness, do it.
Hey, if you're in your early 20s, want to go rough and tumble and possibly ruin your life a little bit, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Do it. You're gonna get so many fucking stories out of all that shit, man. Either which way. You're either gonna get ripped or you're gonna have fucking stories about stories like mine.
Well, look, network with other nationalists is what we encourage you to do. Okay? Whatever group it is you're researching and want to join or whatever, network with other nationalists, get to know like-minded people, and build, that doesn't mean necessarily political organization, but simply build social networks and social support systems. You'll be better off for it. Okay. Well, thank you for listening to this marathon episode. We did cover approximately 2 weeks of content, over 3.5 hours for you. So we hope you appreciate that. I really wish I could solicit donations after an episode of that length. But yeah, check us out on Telegram post, theracer.biz, and we'll see you in about a week.